The protagonist of this manga is a superstar, reaping awards for her hard work. The girl's name is Seol Lena, and she not only has acting talent, but also a beauty that dazzles anyone. One day, something happened to her. She woke up with cold and pain all over her body. How strange, since it was summer. Leaning on her hands, she discovered she was in the mountains, in the middle of a winter forest. Seol Lena was bewildered, wondering how this could have happened to her, but she remembered what happened before. The actress was filming on the edge of a cliff. Despite the danger, she trusted her skills, but during the shooting, one of the harnesses broke, and the girl fell into the ocean. She remembered it well, but how did she get to the forest? Seol was sitting, lost in thought, shivering from the cold, when suddenly she heard loud noises. A beast was running towards her. It was roaring, clearly showing its fury and threat. There was no hope of rescue, but suddenly something cut the monster's neck. In front of the heroine, a man held the sword with which he killed the monster. The girl is safe, what a relief. The man approached and spoke to her in a strange tongue, but she didn't understand a single word. Connecting the dots, Saul supposed she had arrived in another world, as she couldn't find any other explanation. Suddenly, her savior offered her his hand. After thinking about it for a moment, she extended hers in response. At that very instant, a thin, bright bracelet appeared on her wrist. The girl was indignant, and when the man loudly said that the thing worked well, she was also confused, because she was beginning to understand it. During that brief chat, the actress deduced that, if she was in another world, perhaps that was a special translation device. Moreover, she noticed that her interlocutor reacted calmly when she mentioned coming from another world. Apparently, it was the most normal thing in the world to him. So she asked directly if many people arrived there, to which the stranger nodded. And he added that he normally found corpses and bones, and that it was the first time he had seen someone alive. Even though that man was quite scary with his coldness, the girl decided to stay with him until she was safe. So she activated her charm and asked him if he was a knight who fought monsters. The man smiled, but that smile scared her even more. Saul thought he would be perfect as the cold Duke of the North in a romantic fantasy. Finally, the stranger introduced himself. His name is Kalshan Limbertsky, ruler of Lembert and Duke of the northern part of the Kingdom of Eklund. The girl extended her hand and also introduced herself, but with another name, the one she used abroad, thinking it would be better. Saul Selina. Kalshan thought Saul had something in her hand and asked, but she said it was just a greeting and thought to herself that there was probably different etiquette here. But the Duke took her hand between his and kissed the back of her palm. Without taking his eyes off her hand, he welcomed the foreigner to these new lands. The girl was confused, because this had only happened to her during filming or award ceremonies. The man noticed that Saul looked like a commoner, but she behaved like a lady. But she explained to him that in her world, they didn't divide people into commoners and aristocrats. He hoped she was of noble birth, as she would then be of some use, although everything depends on her skills. Then Saul asked what would happen if, not being noble, she couldn't be useful. At that moment, Calcium gently held her chin, replying that, in that case, she would have to find her usefulness, adding, furthermore, that this would be if she wished to leave that mountain alive. This motivated the young woman, who assured him that she would sacrifice herself and become whatever was necessary. The Duke informed her that if she wanted to live in his lands, she must contribute something valuable to the development of Lembert. Saul proposed contributing to the development of culture and art, since in her place of origin, she was a very famous actress, with exceptional acting talent. Immediately after, they asked her to demonstrate her skills right there, instantly. Bewildered, she asked what role she should play. After briefly considering it, the man chose the role of the villainess. The actress understood that she had to improvise, but it was worth a try. It was better than dying. Then, with a firm step, she headed towards him, starting her performance. She grabbed him by the hair at the nape of his neck, lifted his face, and looking him in the eyes, began her speech. Like a true villainess, she spoke with such confidence that the man was slightly taken aback. But he listened attentively, and even, sometimes, responded. In the end, the girl got a little nervous, and wondered if she hadn't overdone it a bit. After hesitating for a couple of moments, our evaluator finally approved her performance, and said he wanted to hire the actress for a role. He said she would enter high society and pretend to be his mistress, and would also receive death threats. The girl was shocked by such a declaration, but she understood that if she refused, he wouldn't take her with him. So she asked what she would get in return, and the Duke offered her a life. The protagonist stated that the motivation was scarce for such work, and if he was willing to leave it up to her, it was because no one could act as well as she could. And that meant they were in the same situation, because living in high society, they would keep secrets. And then the Duke had to give something in return so that the actress would be faithful to him. Calcium promised that the young woman would live in the castle, with money and luxuries, and he would give her the hope of returning to her world. He said there was an uncertain method, a dangerous land of monsters, and he would take her there personally, but with no guarantees of return. Saul accepted. It would be incredible motivation, and she would give everything. Our heroes arrived at the castle to plan everything. The Duke carried her in his arms, surprising his subordinates. The ruler explained that he found her in the forest, saving her from monsters. That's why he was late. He was accompanying her. One of the subordinates offered to remove her cloak. It must weigh too much. But Calcium pulled Saul away from the man and refused in a brusque tone, though he sounded uncertain. Back in the forest, they tried to rehearse his look of being in love, so that everything seemed credible. The sudden mistress needed a story, to which the Duke added that unexpected details could cause problems. So the girl proposed a simple explanation. The Duke saved the beautiful woman from the monsters and fell instantly in love. And there, sitting in the arms of the Lambert chief, in front of his subordinates, the girl flirtatiously said she wouldn't mind a little help if the Duke carried her in his arms. She couldn't help but intervene, seeing how nervous and stammering his lordship became. In the forest, they tried to rehearse his look of being in love, so that everything seemed credible. But under his gaze, Saul felt more like prey than a mistress, so she suggested he smile, assuming the problem was in his facial expression. But his smile radiated neither love nor tenderness, but the desire to murder his victim. The man found this job very difficult, and the girl said they needed to create the right atmosphere. The actress proposed imagining that she had gone to that forest on purpose to seduce the Duke. And since then, he hasn't left her side. Furthermore, she explained that for a believable image, he not only had to agree with everything she said, but also do and say things that demonstrated his fascination. After trying several options, the girl devised a simple phrase for his lordship with which they could fool everyone. They rehearsed for a very long time. The Duke couldn't manage to say the phrase, and his face was a picture. They remained planted at the entrance, everyone waiting for a reaction from the chief, paralyzed. Saul approached his ear and whispered unintelligible things so he would deliver his dialogue, and the actor was still daydreaming. Finally, Calcium said he himself would take his companion. As expected, his men were amazed. They enter the castle, the servants welcome them, and inform them that the bath and dinner are ready, and that the master ordered the same for his girl. They move to a room to discuss the plan. The Duke explains why Selena must be his wicked beloved. It turns out his fiancée died. It is rumored she was wicked. The tragedy occurred the night before the engagement, in her own mansion. They believe the lady committed suicide, but Calcium doesn't see it that way. The wounds were very deep. He needs an investigation and someone who fits into society. Someone knocks on the door to announce that the bath is ready and asks if a servant can enter. Saul tells the Duke they might catch her changing and think her clothes are strange. Because they are not from this world, the heroine came up with a brilliant idea and asks the man not to be surprised if she does something weird. She begs her colleague to speak from the diaphragm so that her voice can be heard behind the door. And the show begins. The servants on the other side hear the girl's screams, saying she doesn't want to. And she asks the Duke to order everyone to leave, even his servants. The colleague plays along, saying they don't need servants and asking everyone to leave. How convenient. Saul was glad they did an excellent job, and the man showed her where the bathroom was. Relaxation time. In the bathtub, another idea crosses her mind, and she asks the Duke to come closer. This is getting interesting. She throws her clothes into his hands and asks him to tear them. That way, they will get rid of this problem once and for all. The man starts pulling the clothes, but suddenly stops. He grabs the girl, presses her against him, and covers her mouth. There are spies listening. It seems this happens often, because Calcium is not surprised. He just wonders whether to kill the spies or forgive them. Then, the girl proposes using them to their advantage and creating a believable situation to fool everyone. What a cunning plan. The Duke admitted to being a terrible actor and asked if they should do something real. But she rejected him, thinking he was shameless. So the actress said she would do all the dirty work and he would only have to applaud. But first, the clothes had to be destroyed. Suddenly, she takes his hand and throws him straight into the bathtub. Then, she decreed that this job should be left to a professional, that is, her. Her performance consisted of portraying a scandalous scene, simulating a most pleasant romantic encounter. The Duke red as a tomato. Afterward, the girl suggested leaving as soon as possible to observe the servant's reaction. The maid behind the door was in shock. She believed everything she heard, which meant everything was going smoothly. She approached the couple and said she would accompany Miss Selina to the bath to help her get ready. The girl was fixed up and dressed. In the conversation, they told her that the previous Duchess preferred those clothes, and Selina reflected on whether it would be appropriate to evoke memories of Calshin's mother with that dress. The attendants wanted to present the lady to his lordship, but she didn't wait and ran to the Duke to show off her outfit. The man was not happy with what he saw, but the servant said they were only following orders. So he ordered the person responsible to be brought to him. As soon as he finished speaking, Selina sat on his lap and began to act like a playful mistress. And jealous, they were interrupted by Lady Janet, who apologized for her orders and explained that, apart from the belongings of the deceased Duchess, only the servants' clothes were kept in the palace. Selina thought the Duke would not tolerate this in silence, but she was wrong, because he thanked Janet for diligently maintaining order in the castle. Then he asked her to prepare dinner for them and dismissed her. As she left, Lady Janet looked over her shoulder at Selina and smiled in an unfriendly manner. It seemed strange, apparently. She didn't like her. At dinner, the Duke introduced the girl to his closest friend, named Dion, who also leads the Order of Chivalry. He added that he is aware of the details of their plan and that they do not have to pretend in front of him. Dion opined that even if the girl feels nothing for the Duke now, it doesn't mean there won't be consequences, since His Highness is a desirable target for everyone. The girl replied that appearance and money are important, but she likes people who show tenderness and speak kindly so they don't have to worry too much. With this, she meant that she would never, under any circumstances, fall in love with His Highness. In any case, if her acting skills are so good that Dion doubted the viability of the plan, then everything is going according to plan. When the protagonists were alone, the man warned that anywhere, and at any time there will be spies, like then in the bathroom, so the girl must be careful. Even when alone, the actress replied that it was not a problem. They have watched her their whole lives. A spy wouldn't intimidate her. Calcium asked not to act when alone, but she refused. They must practice, even alone, so that he can feign real love. Then she asked who she should fear. It turned out the man was fed up with someone in particular. The next day, a lady stammered in front of them, dramatizing her anguish for the Duke. She seemed determined to have a date. She was the person they talked about. The Duke warned, being near her is exhausting. Calshin's fiancé died a month ago. How is this lady clinging on? Either she doesn't believe the news, or she is the murderer. Selina, alert. She is Fional. She tries hard to be adorable. She talks about herself in the third person and sticks to the Duke like a limpet. Selina to the rescue. She took him by the arm and led him away, while Fional ran after them screaming. She caught up with them and begged the Duke, saying she was exhausted from the journey and wanted him to take her hand. They flatly refused her. They avoided her at all costs, but she didn't notice, so she took his hand, trying to push Selina away from his side. But our actress don't be tame. She accepted the challenge and attacked Fional style. Clutching the other's hand, she started speaking like a little girl, saying she was tired and hungry. Fional pretended she was going to fall and tried to grab the Duke, but he simply pulled his hand away and ordered a room prepared for the lady. Finally, our protagonists could withdraw, while the guest, furious, watched her plan fail. Seated at the table, they commented on how strange Lady Fional was, and that Saul would meet influential people in various fields. And the young woman thought that, until finding the mysterious criminal, she must try not to get hurt or die. She interrupted her meal, pretending to have lost her appetite. After watching the man eat for a while, she asked to try his steak. Since it looked more appetizing, they brought the plate closer to her. Then she requested that they cut the steak and use her cutlery. Carlson cut the steak for her, but the girl couldn't eat alone, so she begged him to feed her. The man knew that spies could watch them at any moment, so he agreed to this request too. The girl showed her great satisfaction, even regained her appetite, and asked for desserts to be brought. Meanwhile, the man couldn't bring himself to use the cutlery with which he had fed Selina. For some reason, he felt embarrassed, so he hastily left the room, leaving the girl alone and not realizing that this action was not very elegant. The protagonist hid how to teach him to behave on dates, so she asked a servant where the Duke had gone. Probably to his study. The girl decided that if they had a romance, there should be gestures. So after changing, she was already at the Duke's window, flowers in hand. And he asked her to come in. The man extended his hand to help, but the lady jumped onto the window by herself and overcame this task with ease. Kaltsan accepted the flowers, and Selena explained that she had gone to create a situation that would sow romanticism in his heart. She also said she couldn't throw her out the door, because otherwise everything would change strangely, and rumors could spread. So, while the Duke attended to his business, the girl sat quietly on the sofa reading. The protagonist didn't remember falling asleep, but she woke up in the same study, on the same sofa, and covered with someone else's clothes. It seemed tender to her. The girl decided to go to the training ground and stretch her body, and by the way, asked Kalshan to teach her the local martial arts. She ran into a servant and asked where the Duke might be, and they told her he had gone to the training ground. Selena, noticing the servant's disdainful look, decided to take advantage of her role as a villain. And with a certain expression, she asked where the field was. The impudence of that servant infuriated her so much that she did not specify the location of the field, and she got lost in the garden. Lady Fional unexpectedly emerged from the bushes, startling the girl. Perhaps she was also looking for Kaltsan. They started an argument, during which Fional got angry and shouted, while Selena joked and laughed at her. Then, Fional issued a threat to the girl, saying that if she continued to behave like this, she would die. She said that someone, who was also hanging around the Duke, had already died, implying that the same fate awaited her. The protagonist knew she was unarmed in the labyrinth, facing the suspect, and that her life hung by a thread. Furthermore, she sensed that the lady would not be alone, that she surely had accomplices lurking in the shadows. Just in time, the Duke's voice echoed in the garden, calling for Selena. She ran into his arms, grateful for the rescue. Fear had completely gripped her. The Duke questioned Fional about what happened, but she was blocked, unable to utter a word. In his arms, the scent of his perfume calmed her, and she knew it was time to react and take action. She returned to her childish tone and complained that the other lady threatened to kill her if she got close. Meanwhile, the other also clung to him, babbling incomprehensible things. An unbearable spectacle. The actress, determined to deliver the final blow, feigned tiredness and cold and asked to be carried. The Duke, playing along, lifted her in his arms and ordered Fional to be escorted to her quarters, as she also seemed exhausted. In the room, the girl explained in more detail how she received the death threat, and she supposed that if Fional was really the murderer, it would be difficult for her to do it alone, and she would surely hire someone for that job. Saul was really scared then, thinking she might die, and the man told her she had done great. He was about to go to sleep when he stopped and reasoned that, since she had made a lot of noise, apparently they would have to sleep together. Thus, both were paralyzed by the sudden pressure, but the servant saved them, who arrived to prepare them for sleep. In the bathroom, Selena was offered transparent pajamas, which revealed all the charms of her body, and they told her it was the best battle suit to captivate his lordship. But the girl was just going to sleep, so she asked them to give her normal pajamas. The maid said that they were trying so hard with the nighttime preparation, because his lordship had brought a beloved to the estate for the first time, so that for the Lambert Duchy, this could be an excellent opportunity to have an heir. In the end, Saul managed to get normal clothes and reach the bedroom, but the Duke received her in a very romantic setting, explaining that the servants had told him to do this as a sign of respect for the lady. Fortunately for our heroes, both only wanted to sleep, with no ulterior motives. She couldn't sleep nor leave him. First, she wanted the left side, because he always turns to that side. Then she needed more pillows. She said she couldn't fall asleep because she was nervous, since it was the first time she shared a bed with a man. Upon asking again, showing his astonishment, he realized that it had been an unintentionally rude comment. So he apologized. She was already used to being judged by her appearance, and then she asked him if she really looked like someone who dates just anyone. The man explained that it is because she has incredible skill in the game, and even if it's virtual, he feels genuinely captivated. Then, the girl replied that if she tries so hard to advance, he shouldn't fall in love with her either until the end. The protagonist agreed and decided to be cautious. And finally, they went to sleep. In the morning, the girl woke up and oh surprise, they were hugging. Although it was nice to be close to him, she still had to devise something to avoid awkward moments. She decided to sneak away before he woke up and thus pretend nothing happened. But the man just snorted, making it clear he had been awake for a while. The girl turned face down and pretended to sleep, but it didn't work, although it was worth a try. Her cheeks flushed a little. The situation embarrassed her. That's why she wanted to sleep on the left. That morning, they were supposed to receive a female guest. Calcian said she was from the lineage of the Tialan Marquises and wasn't as simple as Fional. So the actress had to change her strategy. Saul was worried about them receiving the guest at the gates, because Fional was greeted at the entrance and they left quickly. But the Duke calmed her, saying that for most people it was basic etiquette. It was just that with Fional it was a special case. But as they say, speaking of the King of Rome, Lady Fional appeared instantly to also receive the guest. As usual, she clung to the man and Saul noticed his displeasure, which amused her. A servant announced that Lady Rosalind had arrived, and the protagonist saw a young woman step out of the carriage. She approached his lordship and told him she missed him. That's why she came unannounced and apologized. Funnel couldn't help but comment on how cunning Rosalind was to arrive just as she was leaving. Then, Lady Rosalind saw her and started a dialogue about how everyone was surprised by her arrival, and that she hadn't attended the tea party without notifying anyone. She pretended to be worried about Lady Funnel, but she actually came to express her condolences on behalf of the capital's nobility. Rosalind thought the greetings were over and asked if they could go inside, completely ignoring Selena as if she were a ghost. But our heroine was not intimidated. She clung to Calcium and asked if it was time for breakfast, thus showing that she existed. Rosalind asked the Duke who that lady was, but he immediately made it clear that she was the one he had picked up. Ignoring such treatment, Selena still introduced herself. The lady spoke without respect. It was the first time she heard that name and asked which family she belonged to which the heroine replied that it didn't matter, since the person was what mattered. During the conversation, Rosalind mentioned an old incident where Calcian said that if a wife were as useful as a house dog, he would marry her 100 times, and then she started comparing Saul to a dog, insinuating that she needed training, since she was the dog of the Lambert Duchy. The actress did not fall for that crude manipulation. She burst out laughing and said that a dog like her should not be domesticated. Such a treasure must be protected from all harm and valued for her beauty. Then, Rosalind politely asked if she could share the meal with the lady, and the latter agreed without hesitation. Fional was excited thinking she would finally be alone with the Duke. But he left. He announced that he would skip breakfast. He wished them a good day and promised to see them at dinner. The girl, again, failed to capture his attention. The fury was so great that even the flowers on her head were falling off. Selena noticed that the guests had left and was rambling about how that sarcastic genius would act alone with her. But before she could even finish the thought, she received a brutal kick to the stomach. The pain was unbearable. Cornering the girl against the wall, Rosalind snapped at her. "How much does he need for you to leave the Duke in peace once and for all?" Selena rushed to explain that she wasn't there for money, but the lady retorted that any amount she asked for would be pocket change for her. So she repeated her question. The actress decided to give her a taste of her own medicine. She grabbed the other's hand and asked, how much could the lady offer? Maybe the lady prepared hundreds of dresses like hers. She was sure that dress of the former Duchess could be considered national heritage. That Rosalind accepted that amount showed her immense power. She almost gave in, but she reacted and said it would be a great loss. She added that what she needed was very difficult to obtain, and she doubted Rosalind could give it to her. She needed the Duke's heart. Then, the lady mentioned the death of the Duke's fiancé, Ariel, and that out of greed, she could end up the same way. Selena noticed that, although Rosalind called her greedy, she tried to stay close to the Duke despite the risk. Conclusion: she believes she will be safe by his side, and that implies great protection against the threat, or the hope of being influential, or she is the murderer, which makes her suspicious. In short, Saul reiterated that she didn't want money, only the Duke's heart. But Rosalind stated that she didn't need money or status, because she obtained it with a snap of her fingers. She added that, if she wanted, she could be even more powerful, and Selena didn't understand her rival's intentions. Rosalind turned away, warned the girl, and added that if she didn't know how to value her life, there was nothing to be done. It was time for dinner, and the four of them were seated at a table with a huge amount of food for so few people. The protagonist tried to remember any special etiquette related to cutlery, but she couldn't. She decided not to complicate things and took the bread with her hands, unable to avoid a biting remark. Rosalind mockingly asked which village her manners came from, and if she hadn't learned to eat from the beasts of the Lembert Mountains. The protagonist maintained her composure and replied sarcastically that she didn't know beasts ate bread. Her opponent compared the girl to an animal. She even mentioned Fional the bitch, who eats bread if it's thrown on the floor. Fional corrected the girl, saying she was a cat and that no matter how much she loved her, they ate separately. Lady Rosalind's speech was full of barely concealed sarcasm and a desire to humiliate. Therefore, Selina plunged the knife into the meat and said that if she were an animal, she would prefer to grab and bite Lady Rosalind's neck. Fional was startled by such a declaration. It seemed like it was the first time she had seen such behavior, but the protagonist reassured her, as she had nothing to worry about because she had nothing to bite, and she didn't like gnawing on bones. Rosling loudly commented that Selene was no different from a cat. She would mess up the whole table while eating. Then, she supposed that if Saul's behavior was similar to an animal's, then her judgments were on the same level. And the protagonist replied that for that reason the Duke had chosen her, and suggested the lady try it too. The rival reported that it would be difficult for her to match her lordship's rather savage taste. Her upbringing and status did not allow it. Here, Carlson interrupted the discussion, confirming that the status of the Tialan family was indeed noble. He said that the Lembert family was in no way comparable to the Tialans, and marriages between the families were bluntly rejected. He added that, perhaps, all of this was for the best, as Lady Rosalind's status suited her like a kick. And for him, as a northerner, it was much more comfortable to be in nature, among animals and sleeping on the ground. But Lady Rosalind was not there to criticize, but to express her condolences on behalf of the capital's nobility. So the servants enter the room and place enormous piles of letters in front of the Duke. Rosling said they were letters from people who missed him in the capital and asked him to reply to them, since each one was written with special courtesy. It was already late at night, and Calcian had been sitting for hours reviewing those letters. Suddenly, he heard some commotion outside the door. At that moment, Selina enters the room in her pajamas, leaving her shoulders bare, asking for understanding and apologies for her attire, as it was advice from the maids. Not her choice. The Duke replied that everything was fine, as the butlers also constantly advised him on how to spend time with the lady. When the protagonist sat next to him, Calcium covered his face with a piece of paper, and his ears turned red, as the young woman's outfit made him uncomfortable. Then, Selina decided to change the subject, and asked him how he had managed to deal with Rosaline that day. Because against Fional, he couldn't say a word. It turns out that against her, he could act officially because of the rejected engagement. He remembered it and could take revenge, as he held a grudge. The girl supposed it wasn't a grudge but regret, but the man reacted sharply. He said this lady's opinion was her mother's opinion, so Selina asked for his own opinion. And according to him, Lady Rosalind is a dubious and annoying woman, which Saul agreed with. Afterwards, the protagonist told the man how this lady threatened her and offered her a lot of money. Even if she wants to obtain the Duke's riches, this raises even more questions, because she has no obvious reasons to do so. Then, Selina suggested it was all due to her looks, and the man even agreed. But perhaps it was all a joke. The protagonists found a very important letter, which looked luxurious and different from the others. It was from the Crown Prince, Lazen. Calcian cannot ignore this family, as this prince is ambitious and wishes to occupy the throne. Moreover, he is the most influential candidate among all the king's grandsons. The man does not want to cross paths with him, but all families are invited to the tricentennial celebration of the founding, and he doesn't even have the right to refuse. Selina encouraged him, since they would have to visit the capital anyway to study society, and he needs to improve his acting skills for better investigation. Therefore, the girl sat on the man's knees and started acting as if a lover was begging her beloved to take her to the capital. After this, with a look of total disappointment, he stated that her acting was detestable. Immediately after, he clarified that he was joking, building a credible alibi, because the Lord would lie even on the scaffold. The young woman was already asleep, but he was still stunned, absorbed in the idea that he was losing his mind. At dawn, the servants announced that Lady Rosalind had invited Selene for tea. Since the girl had nothing to wear, she requested that her inability to attend be reported. The servants added that, even if the lady wore floor-cleaning rags, she would not tolerate her slight. The young woman sent a missive to the Duke, confirming her attendance, just to avoid the servant's punishment. Another brilliant idea struck Selene: how to surprise that viper without resorting to old outfits. She showed up to tea in her pajamas, convinced it was preferable to appearing in rags. Rosalind thought that even rudeness had limits and would have preferred a worn dress 1,000 times over. But the protagonist reported that, unfortunately, her old dress had been destroyed by the Lord the night before. Rosalind's expression was priceless to Saul. She was completely bewildered. The lady accused Selena of coming in pajamas to offend her. What a vulgar and malicious lie. In the conversation, the protagonist mentioned that she would go to the capital for the celebration as the Duke's companion. Rosalind became furious, slammed the table with her palms and raised her voice. But just then the Duke appeared. The girl realized that it seemed like she was making fun of Selena, and decided that she had to prove that the young woman ruined the tea on purpose. But then the protagonist activated her actress mode and started shedding tears. The man hugged the girl and reminded Lady Rosling that this was not the place to exert her social dominance. The actress had to take the act to the end, so she said she was cold, and she wanted to come in, asking the man to carry her. The Duke declared that the tea was over and took Selena with him, leaving the other girl behind. Rosalind burned with fury over that spectacle. No one could guess what was going through her mind. The protagonist began to praise the man for his excellent work and acting, and for arriving just in time. The Duke sat the young woman on the sofa and informed her to get ready, because he had called some tailors to make several dresses for her. He sat beside her and warned her that the further she advanced, the more nobility she would find in her way. And for that reason, she must learn to navigate various obstacles. Her acting is good, but using only her as a weapon could lead her into situations where it is not enough. Therefore, he decided to give the protagonist another weapon, knowledge. They have 20 days before the trip to the capital, and in that time she must learn manners, social skills, and basic culture, because she must also become an exemplary noblewoman. If she wants to enter high society, she must know how they communicate to be able to get along and extract the information she needs. But the initial reason for this decision was that the Duke does not want to see his companion ignored. Selena discovered that not even Kalshin had learned the secrets of social etiquette, so she proposed studying it together. But the man refused, as it irritated him. Selena argued that it would be useful for her because she was going to enemy territory, and she could give him signals in that language. Faced with this situation, the protagonist proposed making a bet. The bet was that whoever mastered the secret language last would grant the other's wish. The man accepted, as it seemed easy to him, and the girl trusted her body so she wouldn't lose. The man boasted of his advantage, as he had been dealing with nobles for decades, unlike the recently arrived girl. Selena wanted to take a nap before the tailors arrived, but it couldn't be, because a tailor burst into the room. He was in a great hurry to arrive. Dwayne greeted the Duke, and he ordered him to start work. But strangely, the tailor began taking the Lord's measurements, not the girl's. Kalshin grabbed him by the head, furious. He reminded him that he had ordered dresses, not suits, and threatened to kill him. She, trying to calm the waters, said that everything was fine, that he shouldn't get angry. Artists are always a little crazy. She suggested starting work after all. As the Lord had said, she couldn't always wear the same clothes. Then, the tailor asked the lady to put on something with which he could take her measurements. But the man didn't go far. He stayed there watching them work. He literally shot them deadly glances. Saul tried to politely ask him to leave, reminding him of the paperwork, but he insisted on staying to help choose the clothes. The tailor finished taking the measurements and promised that he would make Lady Selena the most beautiful woman in Lambert. Selena hugged the Duke from behind. He considers her the most beautiful woman, even without clothes. It was her small revenge for not leaving. The tailor promised to sew the best dress, one that would not hide the beauty of Lady Selena. She asked why he was still there and not in the capital. He replied that although the capital had its advantages, the valuation of the work was very different, even compared to the previous duchess's dress. The heroine demanded a dress that breathed the latest trends of the capital. The tailor sensed that the lady would debut in high society, so he proposed a luxurious design. And modern, Selena was fascinated, so the tailor asked if he should make it in 5 colors. Immediately afterwards, he explained that the previous duchess always placed her orders that way. He assumed Lady Selena would do the same, but she proposed one dress for each design. The Duke suggested 7 colors, but the tailor offered all those of the rainbow, plus gold, white and black. But the young woman refused, convinced that each design has its perfect color. Calcium reminded her of the importance of maintaining an extravagant image, so she devised a way to achieve it with a newly invented, aristocratic touch. She stated that aristocrats must wear unique dresses, not mass-produced ones. A dress with a soul, for example, creating a new material, or embedding precious gems into the fabric of the clothes. The tailor was fascinated by these ideas, and happy that this lady valued the importance of his designs. The project required many human resources and additional costs, and the Duke was willing to pay. And he added that they should prepare 100 options in 20 days. The girl thought there must be a secret factory. Afterwards, the Duke gave an advance. The tailor said it was enough. He was delighted with the order. The heroine thought he was crazy. The next day, Selina had her first etiquette class, and Calcium asked Lady Janet how everything went. She kept silent for a moment, but then said that Lady Selina was a genius and grasped everything instantly. At the beginning of the class, Selina asked why there were only 2 of them. Janet explained that she would teach her the basic knowledge of etiquette. She then added that joint classes with the Duke would begin after the girl mastered the basic knowledge. The heroine was intrigued as to why this woman was instructing her. Although she hid her aversion, her expression said it all. Janet is the second daughter of Baron Marin, so she knows the capital's etiquette and has experience. That's why she demanded that the girl not dishonor the Lemberts. Janet will do everything possible to instruct the young woman, and if she fails, she promised she would take care of fixing everything. But of course, our heroine is an actress and has lived countless lives, so she was sure that etiquette would be a piece of cake. Therefore, she made it clear that a single demonstration would be enough for her to memorize everything. Janet doubted such confidence because every aristocrat learns etiquette since childhood and still trembles before their debut. But she agreed, warning that if she failed, the girl would pay dearly for the lost time. Janet watched Selina and could not believe that such people existed. They showed her more than 50 moves at once, and she repeated them all perfectly. The young woman radiated elegance and even grasped subtleties that no one had taught her. Selina asked how she did it, and her instructor sharply replied, "You did it perfectly." Lady Janet told the Duke everything and stressed that no one would believe that girl is a commoner. Therefore, she suspects Selina is not who she says she is, but Calcium assures her that is not the case. He decided that, at this rate, they would finish all the lessons before going to the capital, and he warned that he would join the classes starting tomorrow. After that talk, the Duke watched Selina through the window, lost in thought that this girl learned the intricate etiquette of the capital in a single day. With this situation, he could lose the bet, but the man didn't mind. He was simply intrigued by what Selina would ask for in the end. That night, the protagonist was sitting at the table having tea. The maid already knew she had attended classes today and told her the rumors about how beautiful Lady Selina is, which explains why the Duke fell for her. This maid seemed strange because every connection was important to her, but she preferred to stay close to a person of unknown origin, from whom she would gain no benefit. The girl was interested in knowing what she was really plotting and wanted to unmask her. Saul talked about Lady Janet and her eternal grumpy look. The maid was a little surprised that the head housekeeper behaved like that, even towards Selina. And she explained that this woman always looks like that at all the maids and constantly complains about honor. It's surprising how the previous Duchess tolerated her. She told the girl that Janet followed the mistress around and reprimanded her for every detail, and she even once received a slap for her constant complaints. Selina needed to learn much more from this maid. She had to keep her close, so she found out her name to strike up a friendship. Yuna was very happy with the proposal and was willing to chat anytime. Then, the heroine mentioned death threats if she acted like a know-it-all, and she asked if anyone had died because of that. The maid secretly revealed that, approximately a month before his lordship's wedding ceremony, his lordship's fiancée committed suicide at her home in the capital. Yuna saw her in person because she was one of the maids sent with her to the capital, and in her opinion, the girl was ordinary, as well as gloomy and incommunicative. The young woman was slightly confused by this assessment because the Duke considered her quiet and calm, and others saw her as gloomy and taciturn, descriptions so similar and opposite at the same time. Juna really disliked that fiancé because in the capital she slept with everyone, but that was a secret. After the following lessons, the heroine returned exhausted to the Duke, and complained that with Madame Jeanette there were no contemplations. Doing something wrong was enough for them to look at her like a bug. Lady Janet behaves like that with everyone, except the Duke, although he doesn't notice it. Selina mentioned that once the head maid received a slap from her mother for her eternal reprimands. But according to the Duke, those were just pieces of advice on behavior. So, the young woman proposed looking at the situation from another perspective. She cautiously approached the topic of Ariel and opined that her death could be considered suicide, since she received a lot of pressure from Janet and others. To explain in detail, she asked him to imagine and asked if the fiancée had decided to take her own life and had no other option due to external pressure. Could it be considered murder or not? The continuation of the conversation depended on the man's answer, and in his opinion, that situation was murder. So Selina shared her list of suspects, including Jeanette and the maids who went to the capital with the bride. Her behavior might seem like foolishness at first. Carlson never lived thinking about others like Ariel. The difference is that the Duke has power, even if he doesn't care about others. Whereas, any word from that girl could cause a scandal. She lived terrified of being thrown off the estate. She could become an outcast, dishonoring her family. Someone like that is capable of anything. Selina knew that feeling. Her career collapsed due to rumors, but her family saved her. Ariel had no one. The man wondered what words could make someone wish to die, but they cannot know for sure. It is also important to consider her fear of becoming marginalized. Carlson would not take the growing scandal into account. The deal with the Jin Duchy was simple. The Duke gives them money, and they give him a discreet duchess in return. So, the heroine suggested that something makes her visible. For example, having affairs with men in the capital. But Carlson saw no problem with that. He believed it was normal for there to be rumors about the Duchess. Selina said that was just his point of view. But for some in that situation, where nobody loves you, everyone is trouble. And you have nowhere to go. Dying seems better. She didn't notice she had jumped up, but the man took her by the shoulders to calm her. He told her he didn't care about the rumors, and that, if she didn't run away, he would never break their contract. Carlson promised he wouldn't abandon Selina, but while they were together, he asked her not to have affairs with any other man. The next day, the protagonists said goodbye to their guests, Lady Fional and Lady Rosaline, who were returning to the capital. But when Selina said goodbye to Rosaline, the latter didn't miss the chance to make a veiled threat. She wanted to eliminate her before she reached the capital. Finally, the class with the Duke. Janet announced that she would only list a few crucial things for his lordship. The girl complained about the disparity in treatment of the students, and only received a reprimand for not using a courteous style when complaining, even though it wasn't even real. The Duke addressed Madame Jeanette and opined that her teaching method was harsher than he had anticipated, but she couldn't explain to him the reason for such a difference between her etiquette and the ladies. Selina reminded the housekeeper that she didn't care about the status of Duchess, and that she wasn't planning to stay there forever either, so she didn't need to instruct her so diligently. Carlson finally saw what excessive pressure was, and realized it was just the tip of the iceberg. The girl had noticed Jeanette's obedience to her master's words for a long time, and didn't understand what her problem was. Carlson had heard that Selina learned quickly, and he himself learned something when he was young, so he supposed they would finish soon, if Lady Jeanette wasn't so strict. But it wasn't fast. Even after several hours of study, the man kept making mistakes. It seemed funny to the girl, and using the sign language they learned today. She decided to tease him, calling him foolish. He excused himself, saying he hadn't warmed up yet. Then Saul suggested trying again, and asked him via signs if she could sleep in his room again. He replied to her with signs, and thus they entered into a silent dialogue, in which she managed to embarrass the man. Carlson admitted his defeat in the bet, and promised to grant any wish of the girl, as long as she stopped that. But in the end, she asked him to correctly interpret the signs she would show him. But he failed again. Selina told him that sign language is sometimes vital, and that he must make an effort, or it would be harder for her to integrate into high society. She asked him to start over. They engaged in a light sign language dialogue, in which this time Carlson managed to embarrass the girl. The Duke said that Selina had mastered sign language perfectly, so they could finish and start with the dance lessons. He asked the lady if she had ever learned ballroom dancing, and it turned out she hadn't. She only somewhat liked K-pop dances, but he didn't need to know that. He explained how partners greet each other. The young man bowed to the lady, and she had to curtsy. After that, the Duke took her hand and kissed it. At this gesture, the girl's cheeks blushed, and embarrassment flooded her. Although our protagonist is the best actress in Korea, it was still difficult for her to control her emotions. She considered this man's beauty a crime. And suddenly it got hot in the room. The young man showed her the basic steps and told her that in ballroom dancing men usually take the lead. So she just had to follow his rhythm, and that was it. And so they started dancing. Selena stared at her partner's appearance. And to avoid awkwardness, she decided to bring up the topic of the wish again and said she wanted to call him by an invented nickname. She chose something that distorted his name and called him Calzone. And despite the disgusted look, the man kept his promise and agreed. The girl thought that the more she knew her partner, the better she understood that he was a decent enough man, considering his external and internal qualities. The protagonists got carried away a little by the dance, looking into each other's eyes, but each was thinking their own thoughts, and they didn't even immediately notice that they had stopped. And finished, the girl shared her impressions with the Duke. She had liked it a lot, and it had been quite fun. Those words unsettled the man. He remembered his mother saying she danced horribly, but perhaps what he heard from Selena pleased him. Madame Janet congratulated the lady, and the Duke nodded mentally that the girl was truly a genius, since no aristocrat could immediately master etiquette, dancing, and even sign language. Simply amazing. They finished the lesson. The Duke decided to go to his chambers first, and Selena shouted after him as he walked away that today had been fun, and called him Calzone. Several days passed. Her training was finished. The girl stood in the room, and her packed belongings lay around her. She could hardly believe that Taylor Duin had really sewn 100 dresses in just 20 days. Throughout this time, there were many ups and downs, but the girl resisted firmly. She was happy about that, and also because tomorrow, finally, she would leave for the capital. But before leaving, she wanted to talk to Juna. The girl thanked her for the help with the luggage and was offered chamomile tea to calm down before the trip. The protagonist was trying to understand the maid's motives. Why did she hover around Ariel? Perhaps the reason was that the daughter-in-law was easy to manipulate. Perhaps, considering how everyone else treated the girl, Juna wanted to seem like the only person who treated her well. Taking this into account, the maid could also be considered a suspect. But it is unlikely she could have killed, but rather that she facilitated the girl's death without suspecting it. After these reflections, Selena asked Juna if she had prepared her things yet, but she wasn't included in the list of companions, so Saul promised to intercede for her. Her intuition told her this maid would be useful in finding an important clue. The next day, the pair was already traveling by carriage. Selena was very bored, especially with an uncommunicative Duke, so she decided to just observe him. When she got tired of this activity, she finally asked what her companion was doing. He was studying some statistics, analyses, and reports. The girl asked him to tell her more about this. She was so bored she wouldn't mind knowing how many hairs the Lord has on his head. The man asked her to stop talking about such strange things, but agreed to tell her about those documents. He showed her a map of Lembert and lands that people try not to enter, as they are full of demons. That's where he saved the girl, and she had doubts about whether this man was human. He also showed her the land most suitable for the population, where the hot springs are located. But due to population growth, they have to face a problem like territorial expansion. The territory of Lembert is so immense it could be a country, and it is considered independent. Kalshan said he had to deal with mountains of palace paperwork, and it wasn't even his duty. Prince Lassen should do it, but his situation was unstable. Now it seems he is better. Selena intuited that the Duke's power is coveted by the nobility, especially the royal family. They won't leave him in peace until he gives up his lands or they kick him out. This suggests it would be more beneficial for the prince to kill the Duke than to dethrone him. He has no heirs, and Ariel's death benefits them so that he doesn't give a successor to the Duke. The girl thought the prince could be suspicious, and the Duke added that he wouldn't dirty his hands, but perhaps he is involved in the death. Half an hour later, they arrived at the temporary base camp. Through the window, the young woman saw people coming out to receive the Duke. She started worrying about her appearance. She urgently needed to comb her hair and change clothes. Unable to do it alone, she asked the Duke to tighten her belt. At that moment, they were notified of their arrival. Kalshan had never helped a lady prepare, and he was terrible at it. He tightened the belt too much, and somehow they ended up in a compromising pose. Just as his subordinates, worried by the commotion, opened the carriage door. Shortly after, they were seated at the table. She, terribly embarrassed, but decided to use the situation to her advantage, giving it an unexpected turn. So, using sign language, she signaled him to get ready and calmly dropped onto his lap. With an almost childish voice, she asked to be fed, using a new and affectionate nickname for him. How bold! In sign language, Kalshan asked, "What are you doing?" She replied that she would explain everything when the performance was over. He had no choice but to play along. He fed her with the fork, cut pieces of steak, and endured her tender babbling. The servants, who missed no detail, were, let's say, in shock, just as Selena had planned. What a genius! Although Kalshan swore not to abandon her, she didn't fully trust him. She needed a guarantee, something to prevent the contract from being broken. And she chose public attention. He didn't see the need for the show, besides the greening likely meaning fuss or scene. But she insisted. Her acting skills were terrible. They needed practice, and she couldn't ask him to act via signs. Feeding someone doesn't require a master's degree, but her acting does. Improvisation included. This girl is pure talent. He explained that learning is impossible without practice, but we could try another way. And he proposed an idea. He asked her to imagine a noble asking the Duke why he loves that girl. He just had to describe her virtues. She told him to think carefully and answer, "What comes to mind to say when you look at her?" The first thing Kalshan said was that she was beautiful. Then he described her appearance in detail, omitting nothing. Selena felt awkward hearing so many compliments face to face, but she controlled herself and asked him to summarize. But when looking at the girl, the Duke only had thoughts about how incredibly beautiful she was. He said it sincerely and didn't understand what he was doing wrong, because Selena first fell silent, staring at him, but then covered her face with her hands. Her ears turned red, and she could only say that she hoped he would say it in public. A maid saved them from that awkward situation, announcing that the bath water was ready. And our heroes went to the bathroom, but an even more awkward surprise from the maids awaited them there. The couple had to bathe in the same room, separated by a thin screen. And Kaltsona, apparently, didn't mind this at all. He took off his robe and calmly stepped into the prepared bathtub for him. The girl couldn't believe his reaction. When the maid tried to massage the Lord's shoulders, Selena grabbed her hand and declared that she did not want anyone to touch her man's body and asked everyone to leave. Once the unnecessary people had left, the girl said that she herself would help the Duke wash. And she walked towards him, ignoring his request to stop. In her mind, she noted that without clothes this man was beautiful. She reassured him by telling him he shouldn't be embarrassed to be naked in the same room as her, separated only by a screen. She assured him she wasn't going to do anything weird, just help him wash. The girl rubbed his shoulders with the sponge and felt the man tense up. She asked him if he had stopped to think what might have happened if she hadn't taken the reins and had kicked them out. She leaned towards his ear, burning it with her warm breath, and told him that the maids would have wondered if the Lord Duke perhaps didn't see her as a woman. Of course, these actions took effect, and the man realized he had made a mistake. Then she told him to proceed, because now that they had kicked out the servants, they had to act out a scene of coitus. The servants behind the door heard all the lines indicating that these two were pleasuring each other. In reality, Selena was giving the Duke a back massage, and the truth is that it was probably pleasant. The Lord left the place with the girl in his arms, exhausted after working in the bathroom. He asked where her room was. It turns out Lady Janet had accommodated them in separate rooms, and they were very far from each other. Selena said she wanted to sleep with her beloved. So, without letting the maid finish talking about Madame Janet, the Duke silently headed to his room with the girl. The maids were very surprised. They gathered in a circle and started commenting on the rumors that, apparently, the boss in the Lord's lands would now be that girl, and not Madame Janet, since the Duke never disobeyed her words. When they arrived, the girl congratulated Kalshan, as he had done wonderfully. She was happy that they had found a way to deceive everyone, without lying or acting. They would only have to repeat today's events and speak in a way that others would misinterpret it. She proposed giving him a massage in his room, putting in all her remaining strength. And in the morning, the girl would complain that her body ached after the previous night. And the Duke would reply that he asked her not to overdo it, but they didn't listen to him. Before sleeping, they could exercise, where Selena would show him new positions. And afterwards, exhausted, they would go to bed. And in the morning, the Duke would say how much he enjoyed that ardent night, because thanks to the girl, he discovered new possibilities of his body. Saul was very happy with this situation. She loved that they had found the perfect way to deceive people, thanks to which they would become invincible. The next afternoon, Madame Jeanette arrived and told the Duke that she had to speak alone with Lady Selina. Her face was not exactly one of happiness. She came in person and asked the girl that from today on, she should live separately from Calcian. Saul made it clear to the woman that it was none of her business. What audacity for an etiquette teacher to interfere in the relationship of two adults. But Jeanette, as a loyal servant of Duke Lambert, she believed it was her duty to protect her lord's honor and had every right to do so. She couldn't stand idly by while her lord's honor was in danger, and the measures to be taken would depend on how pernicious Lady Selina was. She was prepared to monitor her behavior until she started glorifying the Duke's good name. Instead of tarnishing it, Selina told her she was crossing the line with her lessons, that it was her private life. One might think she was trying to intimidate her with those words. According to the maid, the correct thing would be for Saul to act as if the Duke didn't matter to her. She should keep her distance and sleep in another room. But the girl was not convinced by that idea, so Janet believes that her mistress doesn't give a damn about her lord's honor. The protagonist still can't believe this woman's impudence. She doesn't understand how sleeping together or being close can harm the Duke's reputation. If it really affected his reputation, he himself would ask her to stop. But the maid said that her lord was not always aware of what others were doing, so she took care of it. The girl reminded her that she wasn't a servant to monitor and lecture, but a guest the Duke had carried in his arms, that the complaints of the etiquette teacher and housekeeper would not help her lord's honor at all. Jeanette replied that, even so, she had the right to point out errors that harmed the Duke's honor, and that she could lecture anyone, regardless of status. But the heroine had noticed long ago that such behavior was not extended to the noble ladies who visited the Duke before, especially Lady Fional, who was not courteous to his lordship. Selina hoped that Jeanette understood where she was going, and as she left, she asked her to treat her like the rest of the ladies from now on. The woman understood that she had messed up. She hadn't been attentive and had given herself away, but promised to be more careful in the future. For the honor of the Lambert family and the future heir, she will under no circumstances allow that girl to act on her own. The heroine was already sitting in the bathtub with the maid Juna. They were talking about Selina's victory. She was happy to have been able to put the head maid in her place. It was a bit cold in the room, so the girl closed the window and submerged herself in the hot bath. The maid noticed that she had forgotten her hair ties. She had to go look for them, but promised to bring the lady something to drink. Selina enjoyed the solitude and reflected on her things. For example, how she wanted to browse the news on the internet, or about the advantages of being in this world. She also reflected on the murderer. Saul hoped it was a girl who only knew how to use a fan and not a knife. Just as the girl found the perfect position, the room suddenly darkened. For some inexplicable reason, the candle went out. She called for the maid, but she wasn't there. A cold gust blew through. Selina noticed that the window was open. Apparently, the candle went out due to a strong gust of wind, but she perfectly remembered having closed it, and nobody had approached her. Suddenly, she remembered Rosalind's last threat upon leaving, and she started thinking, without noticing a dark silhouette appearing beside her. To avoid being drowned in the water, she jumped out of the tub, but failed to escape. They caught her and covered her mouth. She bit the other person's finger and, breaking free, screamed for help. But the stranger fled through the window. At that moment, the Duke burst in armed with his subordinates to rescue the young woman. Selina pointed to the open window, and the man sent a subordinate after the fugitive, who immediately ran out. Answering Calcian's question, the girl reported that the criminal broke in just as the maid left the room. Saul looked at his angry face. He was obviously furious about what happened, but he didn't even ask if she was okay. Exhausted by the tension, Selina had no strength left and asked for help getting up. She would have been happy with just one hand, but the Duke lifted her in his arms. It was totally unexpected. The shocked Lady Janet flew in, asking what had happened and if the Lord was okay. But he clarified that the attack was not against him, but against his fiancée. Her concern instantly turned to disappointment, and they were ordered to send a maid to assist them. The heroes are already in the room, he examining the bruises she sustained, defending herself against the assassin. Her feet were ice cold, and Calcian, without calling anyone, decided to dry them and treat her wounds himself. Selina, between amazement and confusion at his delicate handling, thought she felt something for him, but she dismissed the idea. They don't usually attempt to attack the Duke, and she never thought that this time the assassin would go after the girl. Not him. He swore it wouldn't happen again. But Saul isn't reassured, because even with an escort, there are people willing to kill. Then, to calm her down, the Duke proposed analyzing the details of the attack. To prepare thoroughly, the assassin not using weapons could mean he planned to disguise everything as a simple accident. Selena intuited that the perpetrator could be the same one who killed Ariel, as they also tried to fake a suicide. She asked if Lady Jeanette could have hired the assassin out of hatred after their recent fight, and even her slighting. But the man doesn't believe his main servant would do that, although Fionn or Rosalind might. Or maybe it's someone else. Dion approached the pair and reported that they almost caught the criminal, but he committed suicide upon realizing he had no way out. And he wasn't just any rookie. With no witnesses or evidence, the Duke ordered the body disposed of, and his confidants contacted to secretly bring in an investigator. According to Calcian, there aren't that many families in the Empire who can hire such a trained assassin. We must investigate everyone. Selena suggested taking a nap, sure that she would fall asleep instantly after bravely defending herself from the assassin. But she was wrong. She couldn't fall asleep, tormented by the memories of the incident. Worried, the man asked her if she was okay. The girl didn't expect him to get so close and pushed him back slightly by taking him by the shoulder. And since neither of them could sleep, the Duke proposed teaching her the art of the sword. She accepted enthusiastically. Saul was very happy because this way she could defend herself better. Furthermore, the physical effort would help her get tired and sleep. They gave her a real sword, heavier than she imagined, but she handled it surprisingly well. According to Calcian, this sword was made for beasts. That's why it's much heavier. Following the order, Selena raised the weapon and slammed it against the floor. It was amazing. The Duke got excited. He saw potential in her, a raw warrior. With training, she would be unstoppable. His gaze was like that of a professor facing a dream project. Something incredible. In the carriage, Selena complained about the pain in her shoulders. She begged for a day off, but Calcian said, muscle pain goes away with exercise. Tomorrow, tougher training. Danger lurks in the capital. The man announced the imminent arrival in the capital and covered her shoulders with his cape. Get some sleep. They arrived at night. The butler received them, and the Duke whispered, "Silence, my companion is sleeping. She needs to rest." The employee pointed to the ladies' room, but the Duke decreed, "She will sleep in my room. Lead me there." Carefully, he placed her on the bed and asked for a maid. He would inspect the mansion. Her safety was paramount. The head butler informed the Duke that they had thoroughly searched the mansion and reinforced security. The man congratulated him on the work and ordered the locks to be secured even further. Could they be forced? Better safe than sorry. Calcian finished his round and went asleep. He decided to lie down to the left of the girl to react quickly if someone entered. He hugged the beauty and convinced himself he was only doing it to protect his contractual partner. Nothing more than that. Selena woke up and was surprised by how early it was. The sun hadn't risen yet, but she still wished Calcian good morning, to which he replied that it was quite late for morning. It turned out the girl slept for 24 hours. It wasn't dawn but dusk. She was very hungry, but refused room service so the smell of food wouldn't linger. And she decided to eat in the dining room. At the Duke's request, she took an escort with her for her personal safety. Upon entering, she greeted the maid, but she didn't look very friendly, yet despite that, the girl still asked her to bring her something to eat. They ignored her for a while, and then placed a dirty plate with an incomprehensible content in front of her. Selena only wanted information, but changed her plans and decided to teach the insolent girl a lesson. She said she would share the food with the Duke, hoping this would suffice, and thanked her for her efforts. But the maid tried to snatch the plate away. She excused herself by saying she would prepare food for two and begged the guest to wait. Soon, a normal meal for two was in front of Selena. The maid had made an effort and swore everything was fresh. Then, Selena announced that the Duke would not come, that he would rest, so she would eat there and leave. But she would be bored eating alone, so she invited the maid to share the meal. Or rather, she subtly ordered her to sit at the table. She slapped her hand when she tried to take food. She was not allowed to eat what was meant for her master, and so as not to be looked at like that, Selena decided to kindly share the soup that the girl had prepared with such care. After the first few spoonfuls, the maid felt nauseous. She apologized to her lady, and Selena knew she had reasons to ask for forgiveness. Selena stated that, judging by her reaction, the food was not well prepared and that she had added something. So she ordered the butler to be called immediately. The butler arrived, and they explained everything to him. But shamelessly, he started covering for the maid. even with solid proof. He insisted. Selena instantly grasped what kind of person he was. That nice-looking man has power, for sure. Calcian is rarely in the mansion, so he thinks he owns it. The girl knew she needed Calcian. She would solve this no matter what. Meanwhile, he kept arguing, suggesting that servants were like family. Only in families are people covered up like this. The butler thought to himself that she was persistent, but promised he would take measures later. Selena hated him. She left so he would think everything was fine, but revenge was approaching. He sighed with relief, believing she had calmed down, and wished her a good rest. Then, the butler reassured the maid. Nothing serious will happen. There will just be a meeting tomorrow. No need to worry. He was sure the Duke wouldn't make an issue of it. The next day, the official meeting took place, where the butler apologized to the Duke. He reported that he had taken measures with the maid, giving her a lesson, and only demoted her to cleaner. But it was evident to the Duke that he had intentionally given her a light punishment. The butler acknowledged his mistake, and Calcian asked him how he thought he should have acted with the maid. He didn't want to go down with the girl, so he replied that, at that very moment, she should have been thrown out of the mansion. But that didn't seem like enough, so he added that a sum for moral damages should be deducted from her salary. The Duke made sure Selena was satisfied with this decision regarding the maid. But she added that, since the butler had also caused her distress, he should be fired too. Falling to his knees, the butler began to apologize and justify that the servants were like his family. That's why he defended them without realizing it. He couldn't lose his position over this mistress, so he didn't mind sacrificing his pride. But Selena declared, having seen the butler asking a maid for state money the night before. He claimed it was slander without witnesses, but alas, he found no support in the crowd, which only murmured. The Duke longs to avoid chaos in his house, especially knowing how the butler has always been. If he had acted correctly from the beginning, Selena wouldn't have bothered him, so he decided to fire everyone involved. Furthermore, Calcian ordered an extra investigation, and the more cover-up they found, the worse the punishment would be. The couple left, and Selena looked at the butler. It was all a trap to return the favor. Soon, the heroes were seated at the table, talking about how well it had gone to resolve everything immediately. Maybe that butler did the same thing to Ariel. If he feared telling the Duke, that man believed others would stay silent too. The Duke is furious about being stabbed in the back for the second time, but this incident revealed many things to him. Today the Duke has fencing practice, and Selena asked to join, as before she could only practice in her room. The man agreed, but she had to change into comfortable clothes, so she went to dress. She was already in the dressing room with Yuna, who insisted on always being close and begged her not to dismiss her help. Selena noticed that Yuna seemed to believe she was the only one she could trust, so she wondered how that would end. The girl chooses appropriate clothes for her mistress, and Saul wanted pants, but the maid protested. Because she would look lackluster, pants would be more comfortable for Selena to train in, and Yuna was indignant. A lady with a sword doesn't attract men, according to her. She didn't like how the maid disguised insults with care. If she continued like this, her self-esteem would crumble. The heroine compared Yuna to a protective mother, but she justified herself by saying she only worried because the capital was terrible. Selena thinks Yuna worries too much without reason, but she will ignore it for now, although she must always be alert. She shared that she felt uncomfortable with the servants there, but they told her that in the capital everyone was that strict. As long as she is in the capital, Juna asked to always be by her side, as she would take care of everything. The training was already ending, and the girl admired that wild spectacle. The Duke obviously trusted his soldiers. Calcium noticed they trained every morning and asked for forgiveness because they almost killed the girl anyway. The girl was eager to start training, and Jian asked her what she wanted to train in. He couldn't fathom how this girl could know fencing with such thin hands. So, this girl decided to show what her little hands were capable of. She quickly snatched the sword from the Duke and held it to Dion's neck. Dion started defending his lordship. He didn't believe that lady was human, because for that body, she handled the sword too well. But Calcian explained that he had simply been training her in his free time. The other man was surprised that she managed to learn that in just a couple of days. An employee approached them and informed them that a messenger had arrived and insisted on an urgent meeting with his lordship. The messenger said he was from the royal palace and that the queen was handing a letter to the Duke. Selena initially thought it was what the Duke had told her about in the carriage, that the crown prince had started acting, but she was wrong. Calcan didn't look very happy with the news, and took the letter with a displeased look. The letter announced that Queen Muriel planned to visit Kalkan tomorrow. She and the princess were excited about her arrival in the capital. After reading it, without remorse, he asked them to tell the queen that he could not receive her because he wasn't feeling well. Dion asked the messenger why he was so nervous, as if he were going to be killed for the duke's refusal. He explained that his lord always refused like this, and the queen might think she was being made a fool of. Then, Dion suggested telling Her Majesty that the duke had injured himself during training. Suddenly, Kalkan attacked Selena with a sword. It startled her, but she playfully accepted the challenge. He was sure she would block the blow, so he didn't worry about her safety at all. The other two watched the scene, thinking the messenger might not have to lie in the end. When he left, Kalkan proposed a practice fight to make it believable, although he only taught her the basics. He saw her so firm that he swore not to let go until she touched him. What a challenge! It didn't matter how many times the protagonist attacked. The man always blocked or deflected her blows. The opponent told her she needed to learn to read his movements, but it was impossible. Frustration overwhelmed her. But the student was beginning to adapt, and the master's movements no longer seemed so fast. She discovered he had weak spots when attacking and planned to take advantage of them. A golden opportunity. But as she moved, she lost her balance and fell, although her instructor reacted in time and caught her. Just barely. He advised her not to be fooled by those supposed openings. A subtle and dangerous trap. Selena brought out her cunning and lightly struck the opponent's head with her sword. What audacity! Laughing, she repeated his own words, telling the duke not to be fooled by false vulnerability. He smiled and admitted that, in a real fight, he would already be dead. A surprising recognition. Kalshan praised the girl, calling her a genius, and said she needed to practice more so her body would memorize everything. Dion, watching them, reflected on how much the Lord had changed since Selena appeared. And perhaps there really is something between them. Saul was already lying down exhausted, complaining that the Duke was much stricter than her personal trainer. She already felt her muscles aching, and tomorrow she certainly wouldn't thank him for any of this. Selena asked the man why he had canceled the visit, and if the queen was a suspect, to which he nodded and added that he would see her often, but sooner or later she will have to accept her. And the girl thought that, apparently, that queen is as irritating as Roslyn. But if we compare her to Fional, everything is much simpler with her, and she actually resembles a puppy. Kalshan warned that they should prepare for the meeting, since the queen only pretends to be innocent. But she is not really like that. She will keep trying to match him with the princess, so they must be very alert here. The man explained that he has a tense relationship with the crown heir, more so than with the royal family in general. The queen's title is as fragile as the heir's, which is why she needs to integrate the duke into her family. To ensure this, she wants to marry the princess off to a noble and gain more power. So the duke is perfect. It seems the queen received rumors about Selena, so she surely holds a great grudge against her. The girl started to leave, saying she had to prepare, as she doesn't know when the queen will show up. The duke asked how she planned to prepare, but she couldn't answer clearly. And she left. The time to be a society lady finally arrived, so Selena and Yuna were ready to leave. They went shopping. The maid was happy about going out and showed off by choosing only popular shops. According to her, Miss Ariel also loved going shopping. She visited the most famous and well-known places. Selena discovered that Juna had lived in Mian before, so she decided to find out how she came to the Duke. According to the girl, she was looking for work, and a friend told her that Duke Lambert had an opening available. All of this seemed very suspicious to the protagonist. It gave the impression that Juna wanted to join Lambert on purpose. Otherwise, why work so far from home? But the maid excused herself by saying she desperately sought work due to financial problems, and that she was happy to have met Selena because of it. Analyzing Yuna's constant behavior, the young woman became increasingly convinced that the maid had not approached her by chance, and there is a high probability that someone is watching her and trying to keep her away from Kalshan, and probably their plan is to end her life. Yuna exclaimed that they had already arrived at the planned location, specifically the diet shop. As they got down, the girl decided she would be careful with the maid, although she doubted she would do anything in such a crowded shop. They approached the main entrance, but the guards stopped them and told them they couldn't enter because there was no space in the store. Another pair of girls approached, and one of them addressed Selena, telling her that it seemed to be her first time there, and continued on her way. For some reason, those girls were allowed to enter. It gave the impression that they only admitted certain people. So the protagonist asked the guards why they had let those ladies in if there was no room in the store. They replied that their visit was scheduled, but Selena reminded them that it was a clothing store, not a restaurant. Receiving no answer, she asked what conditions she had to meet to be among the lucky ones who could enter. But that question was also left unanswered. How she missed Calcium's help, but she couldn't bother him now. So she decided to act on her own and snapped at the guard that he had no right to judge whether she could enter or not. She wanted to speak to someone worthy of her attention and demanded they call the manager. A young woman approached and kindly introduced herself as Diet, the store manager. She assessed Selena's appearance and concluded that she was an aristocrat from some distant corner, and that she probably didn't know the rules. The woman thought she was from Germany, where nobles with many demands often came from. She was curious to see how she would react to the refusal, and told her that she knew they hadn't let her in. Selena replied that she didn't know it was an exclusive store, and that the problem wasn't precisely the lack of notice. The manager expected an explosion of anger, but it didn't happen. She explained that the store was almost a private lounge, prioritizing regular customers. The heroine feigned disappointment. Imagine, she had to look radiant as Duke Lembert's companion at the next reception. She didn't want to damage the Duke's reputation. That's why she traveled to Milan for the new collection. But she could go somewhere else, of course. Upon hearing the Duke's name, the manager forgot the rules and swore to do the impossible for the young lady. The power of a title. She warned that the place was full, and the experience might be uncomfortable. An insinuation. We shall see. Selena moved forward, clearly hearing the incessant whispers of the other customers. They were judging her. She sat on the sofa. It was obvious the stares didn't please her, but she would take it as training. Hang in there, Selena. She looked through the magazine. The collections were very different from Northern fashion, but they attracted her. A breath of fresh air. Without hesitation, she slammed the magazine shut and announced she would buy all, absolutely all the dresses. The manager was stunned, and a new wave of comments swept through the other customers. The scandal, and the girl didn't care about the price of the dresses because the Duke would actually pay. Furthermore, she added that she wanted some designs in various colors and with floral prints. Seeing that the lady planned to renovate her entire wardrobe, the woman became excited. She would get rich. She said they had ready-made designs and suggested the girl try them on. While she was being attended to, she thought that money was everything here. Only then would people work well. They finished trying on that dress, and Saul went out into the hall to show how it looked on her. Everyone was delighted with her appearance, and she, happy with the reaction, managed to attract attention and start the necessary rumors. Selena loves the dress and wants it as soon as possible, to which the manager replies that she will have it before lunch. Then the lady promised to return later, but a young man stopped her as she was leaving, startling the girls. He introduced himself as Smith, the second son of Baron Cheda, a name unknown to her. Since she had no seat at the table, this bold gentleman decided to invite her to join his. Saul noticed he was dressed more humbly than those at the central tables, which indicated his little influence. Accepting would mean belonging to his class, so she politely declined his offer. But Smith didn't give up. He wanted to know her name, and she felt like a gazelle surrounded by lions. Selena explained that her Duke was very jealous, and they could only meet in his presence. Upon hearing that name, the young man quickly stepped back and apologized for the trouble. Yuna praised Selena's appearance with great excitement. She said she would cause a sensation at the reception. The heroine changed the subject and asked how Miss Ariel behaved before. According to the maid, Ariel was gloomy at first, but then suddenly began to flirt with everyone. Something didn't add up. She also said that at first they wouldn't let her in, but then she ordered 5 dresses and everything changed. Juna apologized for not telling the girl that not everyone gets into the store, but she interpreted it as a deliberate trap. The maid suggested going somewhere else, but Selena refused because she was tired, and she just wanted to rest. She pointed to the flower shop and said she would rest there, and Juna could look for a place where they would be accepted. The girl visibly did not want to go alone, but the lady did not want to relive that stress again. So she decided her assistant could do it, as nothing is impossible for her, even if it's a lie. An hour later, she comes running back and announces that she found Rumor's establishment, but she doesn't know if it's good, as she has never been there. Selena was speechless. She thought about how difficult and surely terrifying it must have been for Ariel. Summarizing all the clues, She concluded with a list of causes and suspects in the death of the previous fiancé, but perhaps no one wanted to get rid of her, and it was an accident. She was pulled out of those confusing reflections by the man who was also accompanying them, and the girl suggested going to rumor. But he didn't call her for that, but because an urgent message had arrived from His Excellency. The message announced the Queen's visit, which meant an urgent return. Upon returning, Selina witnessed a disturbing scene. The Duke was there, although, seemingly, nothing out of the ordinary. He was exercising. Nothing wrong, right? But he didn't look like a sick person at all. And the Queen would arrive soon. As the experienced actress she was, she couldn't let it pass. She decided to turn the athlete into a patient, one way or another. She found him appropriate clothes. She put a damp towel on him. Every detail. But the Duke still looked radiant. The problem wasn't his working out, but that he radiated health, as if he had never been sick in his life. It turned out that Calcian had never been sick. He had never been bedridden with a fever. At least, he didn't remember it. He couldn't afford to get sick. He had to work and fulfill his duties. He had no idea how to pretend to be sick. She believed all nobles grew up with privileges. She felt sorry for the Duke and placed a hand on his head to comfort him. The man did not understand that gesture at all, and, obviously, was completely bewildered by the contact. But then he got used to it, and said that if you overcame a problem over time, the world would be at your feet. It sounded like a quote to Selina. She didn't know what to answer, but she still stroked his head, and praised him like a child. Sitting in the chair, the girl stretched well and yawned, not trying to hide her tiredness at all. Then, the Duke suggested she take a nap, since the Queen wouldn't enter without permission, and he would wake her up when necessary. She didn't have to be asked twice to rest. The girl immediately started shamelessly, moving the sick man aside. She asked to be woken up in 5 minutes, and she would wake up right away. But she didn't finish the sentence, because she fell asleep. The man watched the sleeping beauty. He noticed that this lady didn't stress him at all, but on the contrary, he had gotten used to her. At that moment, a servant entered the room, bowing to the lord. He informed him that the Queen had arrived. That means it's time to wake up Selina. The Duke reached out his hand to her and wanted to call her by name, but something stopped him. He withdrew his hand, and with an almost abrupt movement lay down on the bed, pretending to be dead. Or asleep. The servant was perplexed by such an act, but the master said he felt unwell and asked him to say he was sleeping. An hour later, Selina suddenly opened her eyes, sat up quickly, and began to complain because she hadn't been woken up. But the man just followed his instructions. A sick person must rest well. Saul was about to cry because of how disastrous she looked. Her dress was wrinkled and her hair messy. As Calcian confirmed, the Queen arrived with the princess. Although he didn't even want to think about it, Selina imagined the Queen as someone severe. While tidying up and preparing herself, only after that, the Duke asked the servant to tell the Queen that he was ready to receive her. A rather sweet lady with a pleasant appearance entered the room and greeted them politely. A small girl was with her. The protagonist opened her mouth in astonishment. One would think there were 2 princesses in front of her. The Queen looked younger than she herself. The Queen came because rumors of the Duke's illness had reached her, but in her opinion, he did not seem sick. She exchanged glances with Selina and let out her theory. They were denied an audience because the Duke was with that woman. He insisted he felt terrible, which is why he couldn't receive the guest, and even apologized for it. The woman accepted the apologies. She came unannounced, just to make sure the man was really sick. The protagonist noticed that the Queen was cunning and honest, although she found it hard to believe. There was definitely something fishy going on here. The young woman curtsied and introduced herself to the guest, offering a polite greeting, as is proper when meeting someone. The lady with the hat commented that the lady was pale as a sheet, and that she had never seen such beauty. Selina didn't know how to act in front of the Queen, and the Queen noticed her obvious nervousness. She saw the girl trembling and asked if fear was what made her shake. Did she think the Queen would kill her? The woman was touched by the young lady's reaction. She enjoyed playing with her before the wedding, but she reassured her. She wouldn't kill or hurt her. The heroine was confused. She didn't understand why the other one mentioned murder. Apparently, she had already dealt with Ariel. To clarify which wedding they were talking about, the Queen announced that the Duke planned to marry, and how ideal it would be if she joined Jeriel. She, frankly, spoke of marriage in front of the little one. And Selina, what a declaration, said she wanted to tie her life to the Duke. Meryl asked the man if he shared that vision, but he believes the future will tell. What a mystery. Now she doesn't care about the wedding. She trusts her feelings, but the queen reminded her that things don't always turn out as one expects. Oh, Ozo. She addressed Selena and advised her not to trust her feelings, even if she believes listening to the heart is crucial. The woman found it adorable, but beware, there is a world between love and marriage, and the latter is an adult matter. The protagonist thinks the princess is too young for this, but according to the queen, some young people act like adults. And to convince the girl that Jeriel really wants to marry the duke, she asked the girl directly. Selena did not approve of asking such questions to a 10-year-old girl. Will she even understand the question? Total drama. But there was no need to wait long. The princess responded affirmatively. She seemed modest and shy. What tension! The protagonist reacted exaggeratedly. She grabbed the girl by the shoulders and asked her to think again. The duke was twice her age. Kalshin's presence didn't matter to her. She kept trying to convince the girl that he was old, ugly, and stupid. The girl spoke quietly, but she had a strong argument. The Duke of the North was very handsome. Then she started speaking louder. He didn't seem old to her. He was at the perfect age to get married. She saw him as handsome in any circumstance. The girl felt a fanatical devotion to him. Selena perfectly understood that teenage crush, but still thought the girl should reflect. She spoke calmly and tried to convey the idea that in a relationship, one doesn't only love one person. The princess thought that no matter how much she asked the duke about his feelings, he never answered. She was sure he would love her, but her interlocutor informed her that the man's heart already belonged to her. Then the princess started pouting and shouting that she was prettier, had more money, and a better status. But Selena doesn't need to be the best at everything for the duke to love her, as they both knew instantly that their meeting was predestined. Jeriel thought their relationship was like that of novel protagonists, and that almost completely destroyed her. And the girl refused to accept reality, so, with tears in her eyes, she repeated that it was all a lie. Kalshin believed the queen deserved someone better than him, but she didn't know anyone who could protect her. And the princess, after the crown prince ascended the throne. What's more, the princess felt something for that man, and the queen thought he was a good match for her. The heroine listened to the conversation and knew she couldn't ignore all of that. She had to do something about it, but she didn't manage to say anything, because Calcium interrupted her and declared that he didn't want to marry just for convenience. Muriel didn't even expect to hear that from him, as those are the words a man in love says. Selena didn't believe it, because the duke would say anything to avoid taking the princess as his wife. The queen glanced briefly into the young woman's eyes and told her not to get her hopes up too much, because all of that was fleeting. She asked the duke if he would attend the reception with that lady, and the man confirmed her suspicion. Meryl would like Selena not to get too caught up in social life, since it is not entirely safe. The girl panicked at the possibility of being killed, but they reassured her by telling her the queen wouldn't go that far. But the question of who could have done it remains unanswered, because the queen perhaps doesn't know. But she believes there are many like that. The woman was already leaving, because it was late, and she had delayed too long with the sick man. She said she would return when he got better. The couple was left alone. Selena shared the idea that the queen might have been hinting at something, and the man agreed with her assumption. The protagonist doubted that lady was involved in this, because she was too relaxed, and acted believably. But we shouldn't rule out that the queen always interfered in Ariel's relationship. And Kalshin, and if that girl committed suicide, the queen surely had something to do with it. The duke remembered that Ariel had too deep a wound, which she could not have inflicted on herself. Although Saul is new to society, she doesn't think the ex-fiancé was murdered because someone didn't like her. It's not that she thinks this is a suicide. She is just considering all possibilities. If the girl wants to look for clues, the duke proposes investigating Ariel's room. A visit might inspire new ideas. The man extends his hand, inviting her to enter. After thinking about it for a moment, she accepts. Going to the room where someone was murdered could speed things up. The protagonists move down the hallway. Selena notices that the atmosphere in this wing is much more pleasant. The duke reveals that his mother lived in the West Wing. That's why her influence is felt here. The girl loves the terrace they stepped out onto, and how the stairs lead directly to the garden. Everything is so romantic. According to the man, this place was designed from the beginning for secret meetings. Since the Duchess fulfilled her duty by giving birth to an heir, her husband did not oppose such things. The Duke doesn't give it much importance. This is how most aristocratic couples live. The couple reached the climax of the West Wing, a vibrant and colorful interior that captivated the young woman, evoking the character of the Duke's mother. As Kalshan himself said, Ariel also lived here, but she barely modified anything in the room. They arrived at the door, leading to a small room where the maids lived, and where Lady Jeanette resided before. On that fateful day she was there, but she claimed to have heard nothing, as she was sleeping deeply. Calcium remembered and described the appearance of the dead young woman. The windows and the door were closed, and the only access to the room was through the room where Janet slept. But that night, her door was also closed, so the killer could not have passed through there. And Janet must be the main suspect, the motive being that Ariel did not meet the status of the man's family. But it would be a disgrace for Lady Janet to be involved in a murder, so she would hardly risk something like that. Kalshan has said several times that, judging by the victim's wounds, the killer was someone who had wielded a knife more than once. Selena thought that person must be very strong, and perhaps, if the girl really wanted to hurt herself, she could have done it herself. The girl shared her suspicion with the Duke. If it were true, the culprit was the one who brought her to that state. The man nodded. Anyone she associated with could be the culprit. Even Kalshan himself, who suspected nothing, could be the criminal. Realizing this, he covered his face with his hand, dejected. He felt terribly guilty. That day, he only thought about what happened and the possible culprits, not about the deceased Ariel. She was intrigued how she reached that conclusion, but she simply said it occurred to her. It seemed like she had a similar experience. But according to herself, it wasn't exactly like that. Anyone can feel like that, trapped by the idea that they are superfluous in this world. There wasn't one specific person making Selena feel bad, only strangers who insulted her and spread false rumors. At that time, this girl had to fight against a lot. But in the end, she won and became a famous actress. Kalshan listened to Selena attentively. Something seemed to pierce his heart, and he told her she shouldn't endure anything in this world. She can simply tell him everything, because she doesn't have to fight this alone. The protagonist laughed softly, amused by the possibility that, if she told him everything, he could find those people and punish them. The Duke thought about it first, but then confirmed that if that option worked, he would use it. Selena lowered her gaze at first, but then began to protest. You cannot kill people just because they are mean. The man did not kill for that reason, but he had faced situations where, due to territorial division, that outcome was inevitable. And thanks to that, he can now defend his interests clearly. That's why he asked the lady not to tolerate injustice towards her, because in this world she has him. The next day, Selena received a letter from that shop. They had made a mistake, so they could not tailor the clothes and asked the young woman to visit them again. She showed the letter to the Duke. He was indignant at such rudeness. Not only did they make a mistake, but they also cannot come themselves. Even though the young woman paid them a considerable sum, they sent her such a letter. The idea that someone was behind everything struck her. And that letter was a declaration of war. So she thoroughly prepared to go to that shop, showing that she accepted the challenge. Surprisingly, she found Lady Fional near the shop. Neither of them expected that encounter. Fional noticed that the girl was furious and asked her what she was doing there. She hostilely replied that they didn't forbid her from going. Seeing Selena, the lady thought that shady people lived there and considered her a complete lunatic. She, as in previous encounters, argued with her in a mocking tone, not taking her seriously. But then she remembered that Fional might have important information, so she led her to speak somewhat abruptly. And so that her maids would not follow her, she made it clear to them that if they disobeyed, a terrible fate awaited them. Selena slammed the girl against the wall and began to interrogate her about what she knew about Ariel's death. She asked her once again what she knew, because it was obvious that she knew many details about that girl. Fional threatened several times that Selena would suffer the same fate as the ex-fiancé. Saul heard that she had suddenly committed suicide, so she asked if the girl knew the possible reason for such an act. A threatening aura emanated from her, but not even that made Fional confess. She activated her defense mechanism and shouted that she knew nothing. This time, Selena let her go, but thought to herself that in the future she would have to pressure her to find out everything she knows. Moving away to a safe distance, Fional called the girl and declared that she had been sincere with her, unlike the other one. But the protagonist didn't care, because that doesn't change the fact that the Duke belongs to her. Fional, after mentioning a painful topic for her, indignantly accused the girl of how horrible she was. She didn't want anything to unite them. She told her rival that she was actually a good person. In general, in her head, Selena agreed with her. Fional is quite sweet, but she behaves this way because she knows how many bad people there are among the nobles. This moment was a small warning to the girl that there are people much worse than Fional herself. Gathering her thoughts, she and Juna finally entered the shop. The administrator was already waiting for them and apologized for having called the girl so suddenly. Thanking her for her visit, Selena noticed that the girl in front of her was trembling for no apparent reason. Something was definitely not right. Suddenly, a customer opined that shop employees could not be pressured like that without warning. The manager explained that they could not come to see the girl in person due to lack of staff, offering her apologies. But the girl had loved shopping the day before, so she didn't mind visiting them again at all. The letter that Selena received was also read by the Duke, and he became furious because the girl would not be able to give him the due attention. A murmur of disapproval swept through the hall, clearly showing people's judgment towards the young woman. The girl, for her part, seemed oblivious to the comments, her gaze fixed on only one person. She didn't even have to guess who was behind all this. Rosalind herself was sitting opposite her, calmly sipping her tea. The protagonist sat down at her table and greeted her casually. After all, it had been so long since they had seen each other. Rosalind could not reciprocate that friendliness. She detested such fickle behavior. To be honest, she had no time to chat with commoners. She was noble and had to watch her diction. An unknown lady whispered in Rosalind's ear, insinuating Selena's foolishness and lack of manners. The murmuring in the hall did not cease. Everyone present judged the protagonist as vulgar. Saul reflected on how such hurtful behavior could have led Ariel to suicide. Even though she was an actress, she suffered. She understood that arguing was useless. She was at a clear disadvantage. Selena had no way to answer Rosalind. She thought that a villain in her place would use her power to win. And just in time, as if by magic, the Duke appeared behind her. His arrival was providential. He exuded a lethal aura. Apparently, he had heard what he shouldn't have. No one expected him. Not Rosalind, not Selena, nor the guests. Rumors flooded the hall again. The man feared the girl was alone, so he decided to show up too. He pulled her towards him and announced to the entire hall that she was his guest, invited by him. He wanted to make it clear, and added with a look at Rosalind, that someone present knew this better than anyone. But she replied that the Duke never introduced her as a guest, so she assumed Selena was his woman. A woman who crossed boundaries and warmed the Duke's bed, no less. Calcian despised that the lady could only think like that, perhaps influenced by her father. And his lovers. He believes it is the root of Rosalind's thoughts, but the Duke is very different from his father. Then, turning to the crowd, he declared that he was serious about Selena. That was the reason he brought her. Therefore, he expected everyone else to take this lady seriously too. After this, the couple left the shop, leaving Rosalind empty-handed again. As always, the heroes traveled by carriage, and storm clouds loomed around the man. His fury was evident, but Saul still decided to verify it. And indeed, there was a weighty reason for that mood. The Duke had witnessed how they treated his protégé. Furthermore, he noticed that the girl hadn't liked the letter that arrived in the morning, and that she was very nervous. Calcian asked Selena why she had gone if she knew what would happen. And actually, she was prepared for something like that. The Duke reminded her of his words from yesterday, that she should not tolerate such treatment. But the girl started to justify herself, saying she didn't do it on purpose, but rather the Duke appeared just when she wanted to show her power to everyone. And she listened to all the insults because she wanted to integrate into high society. But the young man told her she didn't need that. So, Selena reminded him that she was there precisely for that, since the Duke wanted to find the criminal who murdered Ariel. But the interlocutor disagreed, because even if there is no criminal, he is trying to find out the cause of what happened, and for that the girl doesn't have to go through the same thing as the victim. And, since these two girls are different, Selena must find another way to integrate into high society. The protagonist was going to say something more about Ariel, but Calcian cut off the subject. She doesn't need to get close to those people. She doesn't want anyone else to suffer because of her. So he asked her to just be herself. In her world, Selena always had to do what she was told, and that was horrible. But that ruthless man, sitting across from her, told her exactly what she always dreamed of hearing. And now the girl understood that, as an actress, she was used to hearing criticism and senseless complaints. She closed her eyes to mistreatment for too long, but it was also hard for her, like for others. The protagonist urgently needed to recover, dry her tears, and show indifference. But at that moment, the Duke hugged her. He thought that if he did, she would calm down. After that, Selena found it difficult to call herself an actress, since Kalshin could see through her. He remembered that he practices martial arts, so seeing through people is normal for him. After that comfort, the girl felt much better, noticing that the Duke was inspired today. And he did great. Now no one will doubt how sincere he is with Selena. And there is no longer any need to worry about her acting. At that moment, he was very convincing, so much so that the actress herself believed in the truthfulness of his words. But Kalshin said those words were true. The girl was shocked by such a confession. She had trouble believing that for an agreement, he was willing to even get married. Selena didn't know that this man felt those things for her. But the fact is that they are from different worlds, and the girl will have to return. She cannot leave everything she had there. Although she likes hearing those words, she was already about to say something about the wedding. But they didn't let her. As soon as the Duke heard that word, he froze, because he didn't understand what it was about. Then they both froze, but the girl continued speaking and explained that usually, under a serious relationship, people understand a wedding. The man's cheeks flushed as he realized that in front of everyone he had said he intended to marry Selena. And it turns out that this is how he confessed his feelings to the girl. But she hurried to calm him down, as her acting skills had improved. Technically, he did everything perfectly. Impeccable work, but shame gnawed at him inside. The protagonist urgently needed to know what he meant by taking the relationship seriously. You've spent so much time together. She cannot be just a distraction for the Duke. Impossible. No matter what he finds out about the murderer, he will protect Saul and prevent anyone from harming her. Settle down. The heroine was touched by his words. It shows he thought about it a lot, so she thanked him for his concern. But what really obsessed him was the girl's talent with the sword. The mere idea excited him. Kalshin affirmed that she was a prodigy and that he could teach her much more. But she flatly refused. She doesn't want her training to become an obsession. She already feels like she can't let go of the sword for even a second. In an unexpected turn, the protagonist suggested going shopping together, so that rumors of their romance would spread. She decided to start with Crange. She had a huge desire to visit Shuna's favorite pastry shop. When Selena arrived at the establishment with the Duke, they were instantly shown a luxury spot. It was to be expected. The difference in treatment was abysmal, and Yuna's absence could be a factor. The girl called the waiter. She wasn't passionate about sweets, but she ordered something popular. The man accepted the order delighted. He asked for some time and promised to bring something to her liking. So they wouldn't be idle, they were brought an appetizer. The waiter said it was sweet, but not cloying. It was clear why the place was famous. The girl was happy and already wanted to try everything, but the Duke stopped her and asked her to try first. The dish might be poisoned. Since childhood, Kalshin was prepared for this, so his body resists most poisons. What a childhood! But the lady agreed, and the brave hero, closing his eyes, took the first sample. After a brief but intense jaw work, the Duke's eyes widened. His face was as if the dish were poisoned, but he only said it was very sweet. With that face, anyone would misinterpret it. But he didn't care, he just asked her not to eat it. She nodded, but she snuck a bite with her fork. And guess what? It was also super sweet. Selena didn't want any surprises, so the Duke tried everything. But every bite was horribly sweet. She was annoyed by not being able to eat anything and having to leave. But then salvation arrived. They had prepared a sugar-free cake for the guests, and they begged her to try it. She loved its appearance. She took a piece and brought it closer to Kalshin to feed him. The rest watched the scene in silence, shocked. After savoring every note of that dessert, the man declared it was the best thing he had ever tasted in his life. The heroine also dared to try the creation. The cake was truly light and not sweet at all. She looked up at him and didn't understand his look. Dilated eyes and almost red cheeks. What was wrong with him? Then she looked at the fork and remembered that she had fed the Duke with it. That was the reason for his behavior. The protagonists were already at the mansion, where Selena tried on her new look. The designers almost cried from so much beauty. She awaited Kalshin's opinion. She wanted to know if she could outshine all the ladies of high society at the court reception. The protagonists bid farewell to the designers who were preparing to leave, wishing them a good journey. For the first time in a long time, Saul was in a good mood after shopping. How great when no one puts obstacles in your way. The girl liked some jewelry, but what interested her most was the beautiful decoration of the shop. When Kalshin offered to buy, Selena showed him all the large assortment they had already acquired. But he wasn't referring to that. He proposed buying the shop. He really had a lot of money, as he had to cover expenses. Now the girl understood why they looked at her that way when they heard the Duke's surname. But in any case, she couldn't run the shop because she didn't even have a name there. But it turns out that, when Selina entered the castle, the Duke immediately drew up a document certifying her identity. And while she is here, she can buy any building and simply put it under Lembert's name. Now Selina officially lives in this mansion, although she didn't plan to stay long in this world. Before she saw it all as a dream, but now she sees and feels with certainty that she lives in a real world. As the Duke said, when the girl returns to her world, it's possible this document will simply be filed away. She won't be able to get rid of it, because the fact that it belonged to the Duke won't disappear for any reason. The couple had already set off for the castle. According to Kalshin, guests must arrive before royalty, since if they are late, they could be accused of treason. After these words, the protagonist began to worry about being late. But the Duke doesn't want to arrive too early. He looked out the window. He was intrigued why there were so many carriages on the road. This scene reminded him of a battle. Both were looking in the same direction. The girl examined the emblems on the carriages, which belonged to families she already knew. What she saw suggested to her that these families were competing among themselves to see who would arrive first. And this time, the heroes must join the battle. But at least they can travel like everyone else. Suddenly, the carriage they were traveling in shook violently. Selina almost fell. The scare was huge. Kalshin instantly worried about her. He approached and asked if she was all right. He went outside, where Dion informed him they had a problem with the carriage wheel, and the coachman was examining it. Soon the coachman approached, holding something in his hands. He said that a wire had gotten tangled in the wheel. Before leaving, he checked the carriage but didn't look underneath. They do that during the regular check. Selina was glad that no one was hurt, although it was too late to ask for a new carriage. So she approached the Duke to ask if they could simply use the horses. He replied that it was not forbidden. Moreover, many aristocrats like to show off this way. Selina expected a similar answer and proposed they continue the journey on horseback. So the Duke ordered Dion to prepare the horses, and he quickly left to fulfill the order. As an actress, Selina has great experience on horseback, so even her dress won't be a problem. The horse was brought, and the young woman jumped with feline grace onto that unusual transport. Dion was perplexed. He thought the lady would accompany His Excellency. He forgot about her skill with the sword. The young woman announced that she and the Duke would go at the front, letting the subordinates follow. Kalshin noted that, apart from Miss Orlin, Selina was the first noble lady to arrive on horseback. Since childhood, this woman proved to be exceptional, earning the title of Countess. She accomplished so much in battle. No one could match her spirit, and Selina felt inspired by this image. The Duke commented that the Countess would be at the party, though only briefly, as she hates noisy events. It seemed like nothing interested her in this world, but the heroine longed to meet that person. She adapted to this place, and now it will be much harder to leave it behind. The couple almost arrived. People are visible. The main entrance is there. They are hurrying. The guards were checking that everyone was ready. They were about to close the doors, but one of them saw Duke Lambert approaching, so they waited patiently. They arrived, and the young man offered his hand to the lady, so she could dismount. The Duke introduced himself and his companion, and they were welcomed warmly. As the couple walked in, rumors spread among the crowd. The ladies were commenting on them. According to Selina, people's reaction wasn't bad. She liked that everything was going well. Lady Fiona approached. She missed the Duke and feared they wouldn't arrive due to some problem. She was happy to see him and wanted him to grant her a dance. But Selina thwarted her dreams. He came with her. She wished Fiona luck finding a partner and hurried off to eat something with the Duke. Kalshin congratulated the girl. He handled that lady very well, and then she said she would deal with anyone. Suddenly, Lady Roseline appeared next to them, politely greeted the Duke. And she heard her name mentioned in the conversation. Selina only said she missed her. The lady made sure the couple was fine and was happy about it. The heroine pointed out to Roseline that she was pretending not to know her name again, even though they had spoken several times. Just then another girl appeared beside her, greeted everyone present, and was happy to see them. She introduced herself as Little. She and the Duke had already met last year on Kingdom Day. Saul concluded that this girl must be allied with Rosalind, as she appeared just as she was beginning to attack her. Kalshin and Little remained there, exchanging compliments and courtesies with each other. Selina noticed that something was wrong with that lady. It seemed like she was gesturing to show her interest in that man. It seems the girl thinks Saul will ignore her signals out of ignorance. But that's not the case. With a gesture, she made it clear that that man is hers. The Duke introduced his companion and expects her to accompany him at future events. What a statement! Little needed no further explanation. She caught on instantly. Her arrogance, she disappeared as if by magic. The heroine was euphoric about her victory. Bring her 100 more, she will crush them without a problem. From then on, the Duke, like a robot, repeated the same thing to the ladies. He has a companion and expects that she will be paired. Selena was already fed up with so much attention, but Kalshin calmed her down by assuring her that no one else would approach. Because royalty arrived. Finally, the arrival of Her Majesty, the Queen and Her Highness the Princess was announced. Spectacular outfits, but not all members of royalty made an appearance. The Duke revealed that the king suffers from dementia and finds it difficult to attend these events. Now the young woman understands why the queen is rushing to find a husband for her daughter. Before the king cedes the throne to who knows whom, Lassen and the queen handle state affairs, dividing all responsibilities. A real team. The crown prince will not be able to ascend the throne. His character has earned him too many enemies. The protagonist was intrigued whether the Duke resembled him in character, but the man said no, because the Zen is not only irascible but cruel. Selena thought that perhaps the princess is hated for the same reason, and there is a possibility that she will reign after the prince. The Zen does not get along with the queen, so they are rarely seen together. Kalshin informed the young woman that, after the royal ball, the banquet would begin. The celebration is coming to an end. The queen captured everyone's attention and announced the ball, but she feels unwell, so the princess will dance in her place. And since no man from the royal family is present today, they need a man who has the honor of leading the princess in the dance. It doesn't take a genius to guess that the queen is hinting at Kalshin. That's why Selena acted fast. She grabbed the young man by the hand and fled. They had to hide before the queen called him. The couple hid around a corner. The Duke couldn't refuse the dance, and many would misinterpret it. The girl could hear the music. Perhaps they are not looking for him, but they found someone else to dance with. All this time, Kalshin was trying to call Selena, but she didn't hear him. She was too close to that man. She apologized and tried to move away, but her foot slipped and she stuck even closer to him. How embarrassing. Both were very ashamed. Then applause came from the hall, and they decided to run back. On the way, the girl tried to compose herself. She just had to erase what had happened between them from her mind. She thought the Duke didn't even remember it, but seeing his red ears, she blushed even more. Oh dear. Inside, they were talking with a man. Selena had never seen him before. Who could he be? It turned out to be Lord Sion. He could not get over the death of his daughter Ariel. What a tragedy. He wanted to talk to Kalshin and asked him for a moment. The girl left them alone and went to eat something. The man begged the lady not to leave the hall, despite the high security. How mysterious. The heroine, with a glass in her hand, was not far off and wondered what those two would talk about. She knew that perhaps this man did not appreciate her presence. After all, she took her daughter's place. Suddenly, a stranger pulled her out of her thoughts, emerging from nowhere, praising her choice of drink and her good taste. A torrent of unnecessary information poured from his mouth, lecturing about alcohol as if he were an expert. Because of Lady Janet's lessons, she couldn't even utter a curse word. She had to maintain a decent appearance. The man did not give up with compliments. It was clear he was drunk enough not to think. He proposed that the lady accompany him to an empty room, where they could be completely alone. That was the last straw for Selena. She was ready to ignore all of Janet's instructions. So, in her gentle yet direct manner, she asked the young man to disappear from her sight. After this, she left quickly, but immediately another individual appeared, sticking to her like a fly, although she got rid of him. After him came another, but Saul rejected all those clingy ones with mastery. Selena was fed up with people who wouldn't leave her in peace, knowing she was with Kalshin. The lady next to her started laughing and noticed that the girl was very good at rejecting everyone. She introduced herself as Viral of the royal family. She couldn't help but smile at the scene and apologized for the possible discourtesy. Selena analyzed the lady's appearance and decided her family was like Fional's. She wondered if they would challenge her, so the girl also introduced herself. The young woman already knew Selena, thanks to her spectacular appearance at the reception, and that manner greatly impressed her. Viral had a very positive attitude towards the heroine and offered her a drink, as alcohol takes away all bad memories. The girls toasted the spectacular appearance, but along with them, everyone else around them also cheerfully raised their glasses. A girl suggested everyone drink in honor of the horse, as her white mare named Sina had finally given birth. Vioral congratulated the lucky one, and everyone together drank in unison for the other's horse. Sina, Selena understood that these people loved to drink, and they didn't need an excuse. But it was better than the previous company, so she quickly joined the general atmosphere, with a bottle in hand, ready to toast to the full glasses. All this was fun, of course, but these guys were very weak compared to the heroine, who turned out to be the one who could hold the most. But she was glad there were no conflicts. She urgently needed to freshen up to recover as soon as possible. She thought Calcian would keep talking to Ariel's father for quite a while, so she decided to go alone. Despite the Duke asking her not to leave, she left anyway and started looking for the restroom. The hallway was dark, creating a somber and terrifying atmosphere, which sent the young woman's imagination soaring. Suddenly, a familiar voice addressed her. It was Fional, who concluded that Selena was brave to be walking there alone. The heroine grabbed the girl by the hair and dragged her toward the restroom, as she urgently needed to talk to her. Fional wanted to know what they wanted to talk to her about, but Selena interrupted her before she could formulate the question. To relieve herself without ruining her image, she asked the girl to imagine it was a flowing stream. Fional was very annoyed by this behavior. She was not a servant to accompany her to the restroom. It drove her crazy that the Duke picked up someone like Selena. She said she would only bring trouble. But she fell there. It wasn't the first time. The heroine decided to find out what Fional knew that made her afraid to speak. Roslyn, Fional, and even the queen warned her that her life was in danger. But Fional remained silent. This is all very strange, because everyone connected to the Duke tells her she might die. And the girl gets the idea that actually, do they know how Ariel died? Selena asked why Fional said she was going to die, if she herself believed Ariel's death was a suicide. And she didn't know why. Her face reflected worry and fear. It is unknown why she was afraid. Perhaps they were even threatening her. Suddenly, Fional spoke. She decided to be honest, and said she didn't care if Selena died or not. In reality, she was only concerned about the Duke's reputation. But Selena said he could take care of himself. That's why Fional dislikes Selena. She doesn't love the Duke like she does, and she fears dying due to that girl's greed. Ariel's death due to greed has already been mentioned, but the meaning was different. Perhaps they meant a marriage of convenience. Fional could not stand the conversation with Selena. Everything irritated her. She simply advised her to be careful with men. After this, she did not want to continue talking, and at a fast pace, she left the room. That advice made her think that the shy Ariel had a man. The heroine recalled Juna's words. The ex-fiancé had a lover, so Ariel got engaged to Calcian and found another man in the capital. She didn't care about the first one. This is how most of the aristocracy lives. A lover would not be a reason for a breakup. So something worse happened. Lady Janet couldn't stand it and killed the girl. She is not foolish enough to commit such an obvious murder. Perhaps she cooperated with the murderer or simply watched the girl commit suicide. Selena decided she should watch the men, and now she knows the direction the investigation should take. It was time for the heroine to return to the party, but upon entering the hallway, she realized she was lost. And all thanks to Fional. She knew the girl wouldn't find the way, and that's why she escaped first. But our heroine is not easily scared. She already survived an attack, or at least she thought so, until an unfamiliar voice startled her. It turned out to be a handsome young man who asked if the lady was all right. In her mind, she was already admiring his beauty. She told him she got lost coming back from the restroom, and that the person accompanying her had suddenly disappeared. The man understood that it was the girl's first time in that palace. At first, everyone gets lost there. He decided to accompany the lady, which she appreciated. She thought he wasn't there for the reception, but that he worked there. The young man laughed. Generally speaking, you could say so, but today he was late for his job. He said he would definitely stop by the reception, but first he had to take care of his responsibilities. They arrived at the right place. The girl invited the young man in, but he had something to finish. He promised to return before the main event. After the separation, the protagonist reflected on how polite, handsome, and pleasant that man was. At that very moment, the Duke flew towards her, asking where she had been. Was it dangerous to walk alone? He was worried because he saw her dragging Fional somewhere, and then Fional returned alone. He thought Selena and he should have gone together. It seemed crazy to her, but she ignored it and said she met a man in the hallway. A voice announcing the arrival of the crown prince interrupted her. And mind you, he hadn't appeared yet. The Duke asked Sol again who she saw in the hallway, and she pointed to the man in question. Kalshan followed with his gaze the direction of the other's hand, which was pointing towards the prince. The prince, for his part, was giving his speech, talking about how they would soon be the most powerful kingdom in history, and they would destroy everyone who stood in their way. The prince spoke as if he were already king. He raised his glass, inviting everyone to toast to the kingdom of Eichlin, and everyone cheerfully raised their glasses. Selena, seeing such a demonstration, understood that this was serious and that the prince had great backing. The Duke asked if the young woman had run into the crown prince in the hallway. She nodded and said he was very kind. Kalshan did not believe in those positive qualities, because the crown prince is very different. He accused the servant of murder and then eliminated him. The protagonist thought that, beyond that man's bad temper, it couldn't be denied that he was handsome. Like a prince on a white steed, Kalshan thought she was talking too much about the prince's beauty, so he turned ostentatiously, without hiding his displeasure. The young woman did not want to offend the Duke in any way, so she begged him not to be bothered, since he was much more handsome. At such a compliment, the Duke smiled involuntarily and his cheeks flushed, a very tender image for the girl. Afterwards, the protagonist suggested dancing, as they had many eyes on them, and they should show them their charade. The young man drew the girl towards him by the waist to begin leading the dance. Both made a pleasant impression on the people around them. Selena likes how they guide her in the dance. The Duke has an innate talent for this and learns very quickly. He doesn't miss a detail, and every move he makes is a sign of care towards his partner. This dance with the Duke was the most pleasant part of the party for our heroine, and she let him know happily. The man was very pleased to hear those words. It was a great honor for him. Soon the music ended, and the partners bowed to each other, signaling the end of the dance. The prince came down to them and applauded. He loved that wonderful dance and said they made a good couple. The protagonists bowed to the member of royalty as a sign of respect and greeting. The girl was a bit surprised that he approached first. She introduced herself and reminded him that they had met before in the hallway. She said it was her first time in the palace and wanted to add something else, but the prince interrupted her. He recognized her and compared her to a mountain bird from Lambert. He took the lady's hand in his and said that rumors had reached him about a mountain bird who had captivated with her beauty. Even the Duke himself. The heroine didn't know what to answer, as it was the first time she had heard anything like that about herself. Even then, in the hallway, the young man couldn't get the adorable girl out of his head. She didn't know who he was, so he suggested forgetting what happened, much kinder than Saul thought. The prince addressed the Duke. His arrival was a big step. Fortunately, no monsters attacked his castle this time. The prince asked why the Duke was silent. It had been so long since they had seen each other. He replied, "You know I'm not very talkative." His Highness knew that trait. As punishment for his silence, he ordered Selena to grant him a dance. Kalshan couldn't object. He bowed, showing his consent, if it could be called that. Lassen invited the lady to dance. She accepted with honor. Now she would be known as the woman who danced with the prince. He took her hand and drew her close, wrapping an arm around her waist. So they began to dance, under everyone's gaze. The Duke himself watched the dance. According to the prince, he was about to draw his sword. Lassen does not want to involve Selena in his relationship with the Duke. He doesn't believe that man will offer her a peaceful life. He admits the Duke is calm, but he cannot say the same about his surroundings. Selena associating with Calcium caused an impressive stir. To turn the situation around, the heroine let slip that the prince had more fame than the Duke. The prince noticed that she looked at him differently, before knowing she was the heir to the throne. Her cunning unsettled him. He replied that Zen always looked good in his eyes. The prince loved the compliment. "You sing better than I thought. Too bad you belong to the Duke." But he cheered up thinking, "Don't give up yet. They aren't married yet." So he asked her directly, "Is there any hope of capturing your attention?" The heroine thanked him for his words without knowing what to say, and he asked her to confess her affection. Perhaps the prince's cruelty, which Kalshan spoke of, was these sudden confessions. They only met today. Lassen admitted to being impatient. "If I delay, you will end up marrying the Duke." The protagonist noticed that in the hallway, the man acted differently. Perhaps it was influenced by him knowing who she was with, or maybe he suspects something. But the sudden appearance of the Duke's new companion is offset by her beauty. Apparently the prince knows Calcium well, and it's not easy to fool him, as he was interested in where such a beautiful girl came from. The girl was amused that he heard rumors about her, but didn't know who she was, to which he replied that he only learned her name today. The protagonist didn't believe that the main suspect knew nothing about her, and even put on an innocent face. Selena said she is a simple commoner, and that it is her first time attending such an event, and the man praised her talent. Saul still couldn't consider the prince a cruel man, as now he only looks cute and attractive. Perhaps he was testing her. Unfortunately for the young man, the melody ended, and he will have to return Selena to her original partner. He considered the Duke a truly fortunate man, as he has such a beautiful lady and talented by his side. Kalshin fell silent, and the young man concluded that his acquaintance had not noticed her virtues throughout the time he spent with her. After that small exchange, he turned to Selena and thanked her for such a wonderful time. He hopes they have another chance to see each other, and said goodbye by kissing her hand as a farewell. The young man moved away from the couple, leaving the girl confused. She already wanted to leave. She had a lot to tell the Duke. Soon the protagonists were traveling in the carriage. The heroine was exhausted. The social world is not easy. She wanted to finish the investigation quickly. She told her companion that while he was talking to Lord Sion, she managed to pry information from Fional. To start, she asked if the Duke knew that girl was in love with him, although it is obvious since she confessed it openly. Then she asked him if he thought she was sincere with him, and then his face showed uncertainty. In reality, he simply hadn't thought about it because he doesn't care. Fional's feelings for Calcium are so strong that she is not ashamed to visit a man whose fiancé recently died. Unfortunately for her, these efforts were in vain, so she decided to change strategy. This situation amused the heroine. After laughing, the girl pulled herself together and concluded that, since Fional sincerely loves the Duke, she wouldn't want to harm him in any way. Therefore, she could not have participated in the crime. The girl added that Fional warned her to be careful with men. According to Selena's assumptions, a man is guilty of Ariel's death, but the Duke had no idea who it could be. So, the girl suggested reflecting on the words of Lady Janet and Juna. They were threats and gossip, but the Duke was hearing them for the first time. Since these words belonged to people who didn't like Ariel, Selena only partially trusts them. So she needs someone who is a friend of this girl. Suddenly, Saul became interested in knowing what the Duke had talked about with Sion at the reception. And the answer was not long in coming. They talked about money. The girl found it, to put it mildly, strange, because this man's daughter had died, and he was worried about money. Kalshin explained that different bad rumors began circulating about Lord Zion's family, and he was trying to convince him that everything was a lie. So, this man asked for all the purchased furniture to be returned to him, so that the Duke's reputation wouldn't be harmed in the future. Kalshin reported that the Lord would arrive tomorrow. The heroine was indignant at Sion's lack of grief, and concluded that all the people here were a bit strange. Suddenly, the man remembered someone they knew, and warned her to be careful with the crown prince. Selena didn't understand why he overestimated him, since they had already agreed that the Duke was more handsome. But since the crown prince is involved in a murder, she needs to get close to him. Kalshin's face changed. He seemed jealous. That performance, even in private, amused the girl. But what really surprised the protagonist was how kind the prince was. She might think he is always like this. The Duke's reaction suggested the prince was crazy. But if his behavior is different, one must think carefully. Maybe he is like this with all women, or only with Selena. Or maybe because she came with the Duke. And if he is really involved in the murder, she should be careful because he is very powerful. Suddenly, the protagonist thought she saw Yuna in the window, who was supposed not to go to the festival due to work at the mansion. If she came, it's suspicious. She lied on purpose, and apparently has hidden plans. Of course, Selena proposed following them. Her instinct told her they would get something good out of this. Quickly, the protagonists disguised themselves as festival attendees. She was delighted with her role. To avoid raising suspicion, they had to act in a way that they would go unnoticed. For example, they could pretend to be a couple looking for a secluded corner due to the fervor of the moment. Selena took complete initiative and kissed the man on the cheek. He was completely shocked. The actress played her part perfectly, pretending she wouldn't let go of her lover for anything in the world. Kalshin, for his part, struggled to maintain composure. He kept repeating that he had to concentrate. They were on a mission. The individual Juna approached was indignant at the couple's attitude. There were people around, but Juna wanted to get straight to the point. Time was pressing. Her interlocutor was a young woman. She mentioned a tea party at the Hayes mansion and indicated that invitations would be sent soon. Selena listened attentively to the other conversation. The girl asked Juna what she thought of the new lady. Juna dislikes Selena. She says she's like Ariel, doesn't understand anything, and always does whatever she wants. The maid thinks that lady has no weaknesses and suspects, that she seduced many men in her day. Saul reacted sharply towards her interlocutor. She was furious that the maid dared to speak of her like that, but Calcium stopped her in time and asked her to calm down, then covered her head with the hood. The redhead said that Duke Lambert had fallen under the spell of the new lady, but Juna said that Mrs. Jet would not allow it. Furthermore, Juna told her acquaintance that, thanks to Selena's efforts, the butler had recently been fired. And a maid. The redhead didn't know the Duke's partner, but had already concluded that she was even more lascivious than Ariel, and that the fact that she only looks at the Duke now is temporary, because the same thing happened with the previous fiancé. Selena kept thinking about what they told her. Those girls probably meant that if she is with Calcium now, she will have trouble with men in the future. Then they agreed on the place for their next meeting. They will meet when the tea time starts at a cosmetics store. When the girls left, Calcium ordered his men on the rooftops to watch them closely. Now, the protagonists just have to wait. And Selena, in turn, promised to pry from Jun somehow. And now that their secret mission is over, the Duke decided they can return home. But the girl disagreed. She wanted to stay at the festival, as it is in full swing. In the end, the man agreed, and then said that the flower crown they bought suited Selena very well. The protagonist liked it a lot, and she put the same crown on the man because she believes flowers suit him too. She loved that beauty and was eager to walk around the festival, as they still need to buy more flowers. After some time, the couple returned to the mansion. Saul was very happy, and the Duke even agreed to return to the festival someday. The mansion staff were very surprised that their lord had visited him. And to top it off, the girl kissed the man in front of everyone. She said it was a sign of thanks, and went to the bathroom, and the Duke remained petrified, but it was a fairly expected reaction. Selena was already in the bathtub with her maid, sharing her impressions of today's reception. And she also told her that something interesting had happened to her. She ran into the crown prince. Yuna was shocked by the news, and was intrigued by her mistress's opinion of his appearance. The maid knew about the prince's beauty. She had even seen him from afar, and Ariel had also told her about it. After that encounter, something changed in Ariel. She was so enchanted that she couldn't sleep well. What a danger! Therefore, the maid begged the young woman to be careful so that the same story wouldn't happen to her. But instantly, she changed her mind, clarifying that it didn't mean Selena should avoid the prince. The protagonist quickly declared that only the Duke existed for her. Juna even envies that untarnished relationship. With a dreamy smile, the girl began to praise the Duke, so adorable in reality, even if he is serious in front of others. She remembered that at the festival, he was very embarrassed by the kiss, so he needs to get used to physical contact. So after the bath, she went to the Duke's office and told him that, from morning till night, they would only practice kisses. And since Calcium seems so thrown off when kissing, they should practice cheek kisses. It's suspicious that a man melts over a kiss. Since they sleep together every night, they needed to practice, and the Duke understood it perfectly, so he agreed to start right then and there. The teacher decided to start with light contact so that the student would gradually get used to it. The atmosphere was quite romantic, and for some reason, the young woman couldn't concentrate. The man took the initiative and moved closer to the girl's face, but she interrupted him and proposed continuing another day. The Duke moved away, his cheeks flushed, but despite the embarrassment, he asked if he had done well. Selena kept silent for a moment. Her face was burning and her vision was blurring, but she managed to articulate words and praised her partner. The next morning, Selena decided to visit Lord Sion, who had already arrived at the mansion. The girl entered the place and saw the man. He was watching how his furniture was being packed, very worried about its condition. He had to pay tribute to Ariel and solve the murder case. That's why she went to see this man, who finally noticed her presence. The protagonist said he didn't need to rush so much, to which he promised that calm would return when the furniture was removed. But she wasn't worried about herself, but about the guest. She wanted him to feel comfortable with her. Zion only turned around, and the girl explained the reason for her desire, as she had taken her daughter's place. But the man didn't believe that he should suffer just because his daughter had lost that place. In reality, the girl was referring to his feelings, because those could not be compensated in any way. So Sion, raising his voice, made it clear that he was not going to cry just because she reminded him of his daughter. Or perhaps she was going to share the inheritance. Selena did not expect that reaction. She simply thought that he would be sad about Ariel's death. The man admitted that sadness was inevitable, because he could have earned much more money if someone hadn't meddled where they shouldn't have. The protagonist understood she had messed up, so she chose to flee. But Sion gave her a farewell piece of advice. The girl had better know what she is doing, because someone already got burned by going in blind. And what a burn! Selena arrived at the room. The Duke was fixated on an invitation to tea, and she received one too. She said she would look at it later, but the truth is, she was very surprised to be invited. The man noticed something strange on Selena's face, so he asked her what the hell was wrong. She told him she had just seen Lord Sion and found it suspicious that his daughter died. And he only talked about money. Callian told her not to expect more from an aristocrat, not even if it was his own son. Some families adore their children, but for most they are just weapons to climb and achieve their ambitions. This world is very bizarre for the girl. She wondered if the Duke would feel sorry if she died. He paused to think about how he would react. What would he feel if he saw Selena lifeless? The girl no longer expected an answer and asked him not to worry. She already understood that the young man wouldn't be affected. The man vehemently denied it, and deep down, she would believe him if he at least pretended to be surprised. Calcian tried to find an answer. He was truly furious upon learning of the attack and disturbed by what he saw. The answer was almost in sight, but Dion interrupted his thoughts by arriving with crucial news. The investigation was finished, and he discovered which family Juna's maid belongs to. The heroine was burning to know the exact answer, which she received immediately. The family belongs to Count Hayes. Selena had already heard that surname. It belongs to Lyrel, that blue-haired girl who witnessed her fight with Rosalind. She heard that surname from Huna and found her invitation. All this must be connected, and it is urgent to investigate. While Huna was fixing Selena up, she was thinking about which tea party to attend. She would go to all of them, but the dates overlap. Since the maid knows all these families, the girl asked her for advice on whom to choose. After a brief analysis, Yuna chose the Hayes family, a decision not surprising at all for our heroine. But at the reception, Lady Hayes was not very friendly, despite Ariel having praised her. According to the maid almost insisted, with such a huge mansion, she would make new contacts. Therefore, the young woman decided to go. Yuna assured her that she could come to her with those doubts. After all, she had plenty of experience. Since Selena doesn't want to tarnish the Duke's reputation, she decided to ask Lady Janet for advice. She was embroidering something on Calcian's shirt. She invited the young woman to sit down and asked what advice she needed. Selena explained that she had been invited to a tea party and needed to know what to expect and how to behave. The mentor explained that the party depends on the host, and if the Duke accompanies her, she doesn't have to follow the rules. But if she goes alone, she will have to adapt and try to integrate gradually. It sounded complicated to her. Every reception has its atmosphere, and people group together. She will try to fit in, but they will surely see her as strange. Just like what happened with Viral, but Jeanette already taught her the basics. She even went to a reception, so she must repeat what she did before and that's it. The girl recalled her behavior at that reception. She broke her mentor's most important rule. If Lady Janet knows nothing, she has no noble friends from that party. She is nobody's pawn. The heroine has a huge clue about Ariel's death. There is no reason to interrogate Janet anymore. She thanked her tutor and was about to leave, but the woman stopped her. She wanted to warn her about something crucial. She said that at tea everyone seems kind, but they exchange secret gestures. And if the invitation is read, it's better to go dressed in black. According to her, the Duke never goes to those events. But perhaps this time, he will make an exception. Now she understands so much generosity with advice. Lady Janet is obsessed with the Duke. Selena was ready for tea. She was wearing a simply spectacular outfit. It looked perfect on her. It was uncomfortable to move in it, but there was no remedy. The girl headed for the exit. The Duke was also ready to leave, dressed in white, just like his companion. At the previous event, her outfit was flashy, so this time she opted for something discreet. Suddenly, the heroine stopped and looked at the man. She asked him if he really needed the cloak. After his answer, she asked to borrow the garment to show off, and the Duke placed it over her shoulders. She thanked her companion and said it would be her secret weapon. One must be prepared for everything, and Calcian begged Selena not to overdo it today. Such concern was very sweet to her. She asked him not to cry or miss her, to which he replied that she should stop joking and leave already. But the heroine knows he likes her jokes. She called him to get his attention and kissed him gently on the cheek. She said that kiss was a goodbye and that she would receive another before sleeping. She got into her carriage and promised she would return soon and left without incident. He stood there blushing. Maybe it was good practice, but what a surprise. The protagonist visits a place without Calcium for the first time, so she is a bit nervous. But she will do her best to return to her world as soon as possible. The Duke was a bit worried about the girl, since it is the first time she has gone so far without him. Still, she has half of his escort. Even so, he feared the carriage might not return, and the servant next to him informed him they could head to the training grounds. Selena arrived at her destination. She didn't expect all the good spots to be taken. She should have arrived earlier. She approached the table where Little and Roslyn were and thanked the lady for the invitation. If the invitation had indicated the time of the meeting, she would have been here long ago, so she apologized for arriving late. Roslyn said that today, Selena was even pleasant to look at, since Little feared she only had white clothes in her closet. Today, the Duke took care of her outfit. The girl has too many, because her man buys them at every opportunity. Usually, he insists that she dress only for him, but today he made an exception. When Calcium saw her in that dress, he said she was incredibly beautiful and covered her with a cloak to avoid stares. And Selena apologizes if she looks too flashy. But Lyle reassures her, as everyone understands. Since Saul greeted her, she decided to sit down and approach the table where two girls she didn't know were. Mentioning the Duke was enough for everyone who was making fun of her to fall silent, which greatly irritated the girl. But still, she put on a friendly and relaxed face and politely greeted everyone present. The protagonist looked up. The place is lovely. It's a pity that the people here only engage in insulting each other. Time passed, Selena was already quite bored. She confirmed that Lyral is related to Rosaline, so she could leave, as there was nothing else to do. Suddenly, Miss Lyral asked for the guests' attention to announce that she and Rosaline had to step away to discuss something important. No one objected to their brief absence, and the guests asked them to return soon. After the girls left, the atmosphere became awkward, something Selena expected, and it was even amusing to her. Suddenly, a girl from her table spoke to her, wanting to ask something, but hesitating whether she should. Finally, she gathered the courage and asked if her dress was by Lamer, but Selena did not confirm. She had too many rags. The girl explained that the designer's name is engraved on the sleeve or the inner tie, and she asked for permission to look. With Selena's consent, the girl took a look. It was a real Lamer. How beautiful and expensive. Her new friend noticed that the tie was incorrectly tied, and Selena understood Yuna's strange behavior this morning. She appreciated the observation and wanted to go to the bathroom, so the girl explained how to get there. Selena noticed a sudden change in everyone else's behavior, perhaps due to Rosalind's departure, but she didn't have to be nice to them if they were only polite because she might become a duchess. She found the bell to call, but suddenly heard a very loud voice, as if someone were yelling. She didn't quite understand what it was all about, but Saul decided to go toward where the shouts were coming from. As she opened the door, she heard the girl inside yelling that her dress was stained, and the maid was going to clean it. It was Lyral, already ranting about a girl who, according to her, was much worse in everything, and whose arrogance she wouldn't escape even in 1,000 years. The protagonist assumed the girl was complaining about Rosalind. It seemed a bit strange to her, since they were best friends. She continued with her complaints, saying that Rosalind first declared she would be the crown princess, and now suddenly she wanted to be a duchess. She didn't understand why she needed to meet with the crown prince, nor what she really wanted. Suddenly, Selena decided to reveal her presence. She heard an interesting conversation and believes Rosalind will thank her for telling her everything. Lyral did not expect this turn at all. At first she got scared, but then decided to find out what Selena was doing there. According to her, she came to the bathroom by chance and witnessed a conversation that interested her. She is in no hurry, so she would like to discuss it, as she thought she and Rosalind were close. Despite the criticism behind her back, she believes Selena should not get involved in this. The heroine Saul and Little compare Rosalind to a bat. Imagine her reaction. Little realized the manipulation and the threat, agreeing to talk, but Saul had already aired everything out. In reality, Lyral and Roslyn are very close due to family businesses. They compete and collaborate. Right now, they are collaborating, so things are quite calm between them. The girl confessed, not wanting to be cold towards Selena. They are things one must do. It was Rosalind who ordered the attack on Saul at the party. And now, tea without the Duke to mock without fear. Lyral says she wants to get to know Selena, not bother her. But what is Rosalind plotting? Mystery. The heroine asks for advice. How to become friends with Rosalind. Inseparable friends for leisure. Lyral took time to answer, and Selena thought that wanting to get close was pure nonsense. The girl could not allow Selena to tell Rosalind everything. She had to devise something quickly. She let slip that their families shared businesses in the jewelry world. That's why they associated. She wouldn't be stuck with Rosalind forever. As soon as her family closed deals with Lambert, they would distance themselves. The protagonist suggested that if the Hayes wanted to collaborate with Lambert, they should become friends with her. She could ask the Duke for a favor, so they recommended Lyral write a letter to the Duke, since if Selena delivered it, she would go unnoticed. But Lady Hayes was not very convinced. She didn't believe the Duke would agree to something like that for her. Even so, they offered her paper and pen so she could start writing immediately. They reminded her that she should mention her friendship with Selena and how much she had heard about the Duke. Finally, she started the letter and thought that if she managed an agreement with the Duke, Rosalind would lose out. She folded the paper in half, fearing all of this would unleash a scandal. She couldn't allow the letter to reach the Duke. As soon as she thought it, someone grabbed her hand tightly and snatched the letter away. Selena thanked her and promised to take care of it. It would be proof of their friendship. The heroine was satisfied. With that letter, Lyral is her slave. Now, time to look for Rosalind and the Crown Prince. She didn't have to look for them much. As soon as she saw them, she hid behind a tree to observe. The prince held the lady by the shoulders, reproaching her for appearing weak. She apologized. Selena thought, there is something else going on here. The man was talking about feelings. How intense. He also mentioned her good behavior. And those pink cheeks, definitely something is happening here. They hugged. Selena didn't know what to think, but concluded, it's not just a romance. Rosalind is in love. It was getting late, so Rosalind said goodbye. They had been waiting for her for a while. Then the prince turned to Selena. How much longer will the Duke Lambert's little bird hide? The heroine didn't understand how they spotted her from such a distance, but she greeted them anyway. As the Zen told her, he and Rosalind have known each other since childhood, and he considers her like a younger sister. Selena noticed they have a very warm relationship, which the prince agreed with. They always help each other, but the protagonist still thinks he is lying. She remembered that Rosalind almost became the crown princess once, but she didn't seem to like it. The Zen took a quick look to see Rosalind and did not expect to run into Selena. Their meeting was an unusual coincidence, and she decided to call such a pileup of coincidences fate. But the girl believes it is not fate, but simply one person's desire to meet another. But the man insisted. He believed she should be happy and agree with him, to which she reminded him that she is the Duke's woman. And as far as she knows, the prince doesn't like the Duke. And the Zen praised the girl for being so insightful. The man confessed that rationally he understands he shouldn't approach her. But seeing her, his heart tells him the opposite. The protagonist was in shock and didn't know what to say at first. She felt like the prince had really set his sights on her. After a few moments, she tried to explain to him that all that was wrong. But the Zen didn't see anything wrong with wanting to get closer. She was beautiful and attractive. The young woman told him he should control himself a little. She was dating the Duke, but the prince was not asking for more, although he thought the Duke had her so obsessed that he wouldn't allow her to look at another man. Besides, she was not married to him, and he hadn't made her any promises for the future. Suddenly, someone hugged her from behind and pulled her closer. It was Kalshin, who announced that he would soon make his promise. Only an hour ago, when he accompanied her, he mentally reviewed all the knights he sent with her, and their number should reassure anyone. Then a servant approached, reminding him that they had to go to the training grounds. And the Duke repeated one last time that Selena was well protected. But during training, he couldn't stop worrying and put too much force into it. Dion tried to calm him down, telling him it was just a practice match. But the Duke remained lost in his thoughts. His friend suggested trying again, more calmly. But the Duke only thought of Selena, who was now in danger. He hurried to leave the training grounds, explaining that something might have happened to Selena. Things happened suddenly. Dion did not understand what could happen at tea with Lyral, and then the Duke became thoughtful. But then, terrible scenarios invaded his mind, driving him to act immediately. And strangely enough, Kalshin's intuition did not fail, because he appeared with Selena just in time. The man told the prince that he was cautious with Selena, But if that worried him, he was willing to promise something. He apologized for interrupting their conversation, but admitted to being very possessive of the people he considers his own. It was not new to the prince, but it still seemed unfair to him. That girl was not his property. That meant she could speak freely with Lassen and had every right to follow the dictates of her heart. Kalshan understood perfectly, but refused to let her go, simply because he didn't want to. After a brief exchange, the prince advised the duke to be cautious, because if he pressured too much, the little bird might fly away. But if necessary, the Zen had a rather large cage to give her freedom, to which Kalshan simply thanked him for the advice, without hiding his displeasure. Immediately after, the prince said that today's talk was enough and asked permission to say goodbye to the lady. But they refused him. The young man didn't grieve much over it, but apologized to Selina for the discourtesy of not saying goodbye to her. Instead, he promised to continue their conversation at their next meeting. Selina could barely nod, because they squeezed her even tighter against him, which amused the young man. The crown prince had already left, and the young woman reminded the duke that he could let her go now. She asked why he had arrived so suddenly, to which he replied that he was simply passing by. The young woman congratulated him on his excellent performance, and to know the prince's intentions, she had to investigate further. But today, the duke had appeared at the least opportune moment. Apparently, the man did not like such a comment, and even suggested that the young woman planned to switch sides to the prince. The protagonist thought her companion had simply gone foolish, as she had no need to change sides, since the duke was the only one who could return her to her world. The boy was a bit shocked, completely forgetting his contract, and she had already scolded him for that. According to her, it was fine, and Kalshan did not need to come, because she doubted the prince would harm her. He had many opportunities to kill her, and he didn't. So there must be a reason why he is approaching her. Or is he not pretending to be in love, but has been sincere all this time? Faced with such a supposition, the duke's jaw dropped. But if it's true, he and the prince could have a triple duel, and then Kalshan would have the opportunity to kill him legally. Selina confirmed that Rosalind controls Lyral, and that something is going on between her and the prince. But the duke said that guy doesn't care about her at all. And since that man loves no one but himself, the duke asked Selina not to believe his nonsense or think he is in love with her. It's impossible. The heroine became convinced that Kalshan hates the crown prince, judging by how sharply he reacts when he is mentioned. Afterward, she decided to go have tea with the royal family, and the duke begged her to accompany him. The thing is, they invited her alone, but now everyone is sitting at the table, and this man still hasn't left. The girls thought they made a lovely couple, but Viorel did not expect to see the duke there too. Selina explained that he was only interested in the atmosphere at the tea, and that he would leave soon. To get his support, Yunzi pinched his leg without anyone seeing, but he didn't care and stayed. But Viorel was happy about his visit. She was eager to see them since the last time. People started gathering around the heroine. They had never seen someone drink so much. They admired her talent. Many wanted to chat with her longer. And Selina was glad to be welcomed somewhere. She was like the goddess Dionysus herself. And the girl loved having made such a good impression, so she encouraged everyone to start the party and to drink the first toast to her health. The girl ordered everyone to drink deeply and warned she was watching everyone. But suddenly her cup was snatched away. It was Kalshan. Without remorse, he took and drank her drink while the others were in shock. He justified his action by saying they had many enemies and poisoning was very likely, especially at the first tea. So he announced he would drink for the girl, as he had immunity to poisons. What a gentleman! Selina was about to retort that he shouldn't, but the crowd behind her shrieked. Moved by such romanticism, the girls said they understood and would drink with him. And then in chorus, they proposed a toast to the duke's infinite love. The protagonist found it perfect. All these people were so kind and accepted her as a person, not just as the duke's mistress. Time passed. Viorel was already quite drunk, and she assumed the duke was bored, which is why he was drinking too. The man confirmed it, and although, according to her, he shouldn't have gone to that gathering, it was an honor for them that he joined. So she deduced that this man cared a lot about Lady Selina, and asked him to confirm his words. And he confirmed it, saying he wouldn't leave her alone where there are men and alcohol, which touched Viorel. She asked how this lady managed to melt his cold heart, to the point of even going where he didn't want to go. The young man smiled smugly, and gave a rather interesting answer. It was all due to her beauty. Viral didn't understand why Selena was so surprised, as she heard it daily, but she said she didn't expect him to say it in public. The protagonist hurried to leave, saying she had to go to the bathroom, while the others admired her audacity. She truly felt uncomfortable. She didn't understand when Kalshin had become such a good actor. The man said he would accompany her. He didn't mind her going to the bathroom because anything could happen, like the time she ran into the prince. The girl replied that he wouldn't show up there, and if he did, he couldn't do anything. But the young man was adamant. At that moment, a woman who had heard the entire conversation approached and advised the Duke not to invade the lady's personal boundaries. The savior greeted Selena and introduced herself as the Duchess of Orleans. The girl was happy they finally met. The Duke noticed she wasn't carrying weapons, to which she replied that they shouldn't be visible at a social event, and that he shouldn't underestimate her skills. She asked permission to accompany Selena, who was delighted, as the Duke had told her about her exceptional abilities. So Saul dragged the Duchess by the hand and asked Kalshin to wait there, and not to stick his head out. Alone with her, she told him she had never seen him like this, to which the woman replied that she simply appreciated her a lot. To tell the truth, the Duchess did not expect to see Selena like this. She thought the Duke's lady would be a venomous dame, but she turned out to be shy. Like a child, noting the vehement reaction, she hurried to explain that she didn't mean to offend, but simply to pay a compliment. Then, the heroine understood that she had no bad intentions, but was just very direct. The Duchess had already decided the previous time that Selena was an interesting person, and now she was convinced of it after speaking with her in person. But the heroine had already gotten used to being hated, even before meeting her in person, and that they tried to set her up in the first encounter. The interlocutor said that high society is like that. They don't care who you are. They will keep saying the opposite about you. According to her, Selena is still a fledgling in high society, but she is no longer sure of herself. Or she is looking for someone better than the Duke. The girl was stunned, and the Duchess laughed at her reaction. She apologized, saying perhaps they had misunderstood her. In reality, she meant that she really likes Selena as a person, and it doesn't matter which man she dates. She would like to keep seeing her. According to her, in the Lambert family, men change women frequently, both now and before. And despite being in love now, seeing the Duke's past, it is hard to ensure that love will last. The Duchess likes Selena very much, so she wouldn't want that girl's heart to be broken. It occurs to the girl that they are telling her she deserves something better, confirming the sympathy of her interlocutor. Although she seems cold towards Kalshin, the Duchess excused herself, saying she likes him too, and that people like the two of them are hard to find. The protagonist understood that Kalshin is seen as a fickle man, so everyone thinks she is a passing romance. So she had a brilliant idea, so today she will have to cause a stir at the tea meeting. While Kalshin was already burning with desire due to the long absence of the girls, Viral tried to calm him down, saying that they are surely just chatting. The Duke suddenly asks if there is a guarantee that the powder room is a safe place. The girl was surprised, not getting an immediate answer. The man became a little enraged for not being told instantly that they were not sure about the safety of the place. Viral was surprised by such a reaction, confirming that the Duke was not exactly a patient man. That was true. Suddenly, Selena finally approached them. Neither the Duke nor Viral expected to see her so suddenly, but they pretended everything was fine. In the following replies, the heroine was already referring to the Duke as darling, leaving everyone else dumbfounded. She asked her darling to bring her a new glass, as she didn't want to finish the alcohol she already had. And according to the agreement, he had to do everything she said, so he fulfilled her request without hesitation, something that did not escape Viral's eyes. When she already had the new glass in front of her, she suddenly changed her mind and simply wished for water. Viral got the impression that Selena was training the Duke, because he obeyed all her orders without arguing. The man even added 3 ice cubes to the water at her request, and asked if she needed anything else. But she asked him to simply sit with her. The girl rested her head on the young man's shoulder and told him about her discovery today, that everyone thought their relationship was temporary, and she became curious to know how far her darling was willing to go for her. So she asked him directly. The answer she got was that this man was willing to go as far as necessary. Then the girl asked if her darling could reach her a star, but first he had to find a way, and that answer satisfied her. Therefore, her request for today was for him to pluck a flower from a tree. Selena seemed to be asking for a dream, as if next she would ask him to give her the clouds. And from there to the star, there wouldn't be much distance. So, Kalshan stood up and walked silently towards the tree, while Selena watched him without saying anything. The guests also watched this romantic scene, exchanging looks of astonishment. Upon reaching the tree, the man, with a jump, reached exactly the flower that Saul had pointed out. He plucked the future gift and landed agilely on the ground, with impressive grace. Then he approached Selena and carefully placed his gift behind her ear, while the girl watched in silence. And after the presentation, he looked at her tenderly and, smiling, told her she would have to wait for the clouds. The heroine smiled and extended her arms to the Duke, swearing she would wait. The next day, Selena was with Juna, surrounded by a mountain of invitations. The maid warned that choosing dresses would take time, but Selena just wanted a break. So Selena went to train with the Duke, leaving Yuna in charge of the invitations. The maid wished a good day, and as the door closed, she attacked the envelopes with fury. She didn't know how to find the correct letter, unable to read the senders' names, but she had to find the Hayes family symbol, and she soon had it in her hands. With that letter, she would get more money from Lyle. But before finishing, Selena burst in. The heroine caught her maid red-handed and demanded the letter be handed over.